Okay, Steve, are you running the meeting?
Yeah,
Okay, so you want to do a roll call?
certainly. And I'll start with virtual participants. Ms. Tabachnik,
Here.
Mr. Mushak,
You're muted, Mike. Mike, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, thanks.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Rowena,
Here.
Ms. Jordan Byron,
Present.
Ms. Lane Gallis,
Here.
and Mr. Schulman.
Here, did you call Ms. Tabachnik?
Yeah, and I didn't see Ms. Wells, so I don't know if she's there.
She is.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oops, sorry about that. Thanks.
Okay. This is a continuation of public hearing 2023-01 POCD, Planning and Zoning Commission Amendment to the 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development to adopt the Norwalk Industrial Waterfront Land Use Plan dated September 2022 as an addendum to the POCD. When we ended the hearing, we were in the midst of hearing comments from the public. I indicated that at this meeting, people would be able to comment if there was new information that we had received that they wish to comment on. So with that, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Yeah. Want me to do?
Okay, do we have people signed up on the internet as well? Let's go one and one.
Lionel Jones.
Hello, my name is Lynelle Jones. For over 35 years, I have lived at 10 Point Road. And during the 90s, my husband and I also owned 8 Point Road, which has a tidal pond, and 2.5 Nathan Hill Drive, a waterfront property next to a tidal wetland swale, which was improperly filled, which when improperly filled, increased flooding on Nathan Hill Drive, creating a public nuisance. My comments this evening relate to the letters shared following the last meeting. The POCD is required by law, as are hazard mitigation plans, recovery plans, and now resiliency plans are also required by law. The purpose of resiliency planning is to accelerate recovery after a flood event and reduce vulnerability of existing development, not to create conditions to support or encourage increased development in flood hazard zones. CERCA was funded to tell municipalities to prepare for rising sea levels, and AECOM used the old flood maps, not the new ones that just came out in 2023, which increased the flood zones and raised the flood risk in Norwalk. What CERCA presented was conceptual, because they have no idea what lies beneath our roads. However, they made it clear that it is the obligation of the city to consider and plan for public health and safety of existing residential communities now facing flood and storm risk. There's no question I am not popular with either Norwalk City leaders, leaders of my private association, or leaders of the Norwalk Yacht Club, because for decades I have questioned stormwater management and specifically the lack of enforcement of coastal and wetland regulations, which has increased flooding and pollution in my neighborhood. Attorney Blank, who wrote an insulting and disparaging letter about me in 2021, saying I didn't know what he knew, received a notice of violation this February for his client, the Norwalk Yacht Club. The NOV issued to Attorney Blank's client by deed was for not having the proper waterfront permit or a proper stormwater management plan as per outstanding complaints. This waterfront club was required to develop a stormwater management plan 60 pages, stormwater training, weekly stormwater check sheets, and test water for bacteria and minerals twice a year, all required by existing coastal regulations, never enforced by Norwalk. However, ultimately enforced by DEEP following my and other complaints. DEEP's letter, September 21, references Water Street Marine Commercial District and states that, quote, the city consider its own potential liability risks associated with allowing increases in residential density, unquote. Liability was also mentioned in my previous letter to you, and potential liability is the reason why it is so shocking, unbelievable that Utah would completely disregard contamination sites, that when flooded, spread contamination the same way floodwaters flush septic systems, washing pollution directly into our waters. Remember the DEEP consent decree to cease mixing sewage and stormwater? This, originally a lawsuit, was negotiated into a consent decree, the surprise $50 million expense for Norwalk taxpayers. Neither the health department nor any of Norwalk's water commissions nor the CFO knew about this decree and that $50 million taxpayer surprise until I shared it with them. Norwalk's MS4 permit, the basis for the consent decree, also requires Norwalk to produce an annual stormwater management plan, which requires public comment and minimum goals that I allege have never happened in Norwalk. Brian Baker, Alexis Cherichetti, and the Norwalk Planning and Zoning Department are specifically mentioned as responsible for meeting the stormwater management plan's implementation goals, which I have commented on, asking questions. No one in Norwalk's city government has ever answered the questions posed in my annual stormwater management plan comments about why no effort to engage the public, educate the public, or enforcement of what is required under our own self-created stormwater management plan designed for best practices, water quality, and public health and safety. Director Kleppen has stated many times and wrote in his memo that his proposals, his ideas will improve drainage, stormwater management, and water quality. However, the enforcement by DEEP for stormwater management and pollution control at the Norwalk Yacht Club shows regulations already exist. P&Z is listed as being responsible for meeting the goals of the stormwater management plan, yet as proven with the Norwalk Yacht Club example, stormwater management has never been enforced in Norwalk. Now we know this will cost $50 million, and that's before any assessment of whether our drainage infrastructure can handle the density already approved, particularly in the coastal flood zone. 80+ coastal drains that I have shared are still not on city maps as required by our MS4. No storm drain has been marked not for trash as required by our MS4. And seeing newly paved roads painted with new signs for bike lanes, new storm drains not marked not for trash, it becomes clear that no one is even thinking of storm drains, drainage, infrastructure, those things you don't see. Let's forget my suggestion of the Stormwater Authority. Now you know, water will rise. Circa warned yesterday to plan for 3 feet plus higher sea levels due to warming oceans. And this is not a maximum, it's a minimum. This new FEMA and NOAA floodplain maps issued this year for municipal planners show the flood zones in Norwalk's increased and the risks have increased. Storms are more intense, capable of dropping the equivalent of a month's rain in an hour, creating different and equally challenging stormwater management. And Norwalk is already 50 million in the hole for not being properly prepared. Stormwater management matters more than ever. One of the letters posted late this afternoon has many flood photos and makes the statement that after reviewing the photos, it will become obvious that blatant disregard for sound resiliency planning and floodplain management in the face of rising sea levels and coastal storms can have significant repercussions on both human safety and the financial burden on taxpayers. The financial burden on taxpayers, if proactive planning and investment in resiliency measures does not happen, includes infrastructure and repair, the 50 we already have. 2, emergency response and relief. 3, insurance costs. 4, flood insurance subsidiaries. 5, economic impact. This doesn't affect just coastal Norwalk citizens. This affects everyone. I and others ask you to find the courage, character, and intelligence to insist that your commission and the Common Council members who believe it is in Norwalk's taxpayers' best interest to rezone our marine commercial waterfront district take the time and really get your heads around the circa warning and recommendations to raise streets, which is part of the state mandated resiliency planning. Not doing so is a $1 billion disaster risk, a huge potential liability for Norwalk taxpayers. Don't be fooled thinking we need new regulations to manage stormwater. As Attorney Blank learned with his client, the Norwalk Yacht Club, stormwater management and coastal regulations exist. The EPA and DEEP expect municipalities to enforce regulations. Politicians can't change the physics of water. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone who's on the list from the internet.
Yeah, if you're participating online, you can use the raise your hand function on the bottom of the screen, or if you're by phone, *9.
Okay, then let's go back to the list.
Oh, yeah, it's me. Thank you. Rich Bonifant.
Good evening, Rich Bonifant, 17 Park Hill Avenue, and I'm going to be a little briefer than the last speaker, but she had a lot of points. If this amendment is an opening to build residential units on the water side of Water Street, I urge you to vote no. Every related water commission, shellfish, harbor management, they're all urging you, and they're all writing you letters to say, please don't do this, right? The DEEP wrote a letter, I saw that one online, and they're telling you the same thing, and they're telling you to don't come crying to them if things go wrong and you build apartments and residential units on the water. Just want to say that recreational boating has been a long-standing tradition in Norwalk, and I would be against anything that hurts that. And the Water Street is really important. I mean, back in the day when we were kids, you didn't need a permit. You just go out to Cockini Island, bring your BB gun and shoot rats in the morning. But you know, but I don't think he'd do that anymore. But you know, that's all right. So anyway, I would urge you to stop anything that would harm the recreational boating industry and the other industries along the water. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Diane Keefe.
Diane Keefe, 249 Chestnut Hill Road is my residence. I've lived in the city, been a taxpayer here for 32 years. And I agree with the previous two speakers. I also had some time as an environmental planner earlier in my career, and I'm now a green investor. I'm looking for climate solutions in my investing. And the reason is that it's the biggest issue in our time besides nuclear war. And I don't believe that the current plan takes into consideration enough of how serious this climate emergency is. And I went last night to the presentation, and first I asked the AECOM representative, so how much underwater was this area during Sandy? And he didn't know. And then I said, so what is this plan for? What are you assuming? And he said, the 10-year flood. Well, as we all know, what's been happening lately is that the 10-year flood actually ends up happening every 2 or 3 years. So I think when we plan, we really need to think about accelerating climate change, because all of the goal setting that's been done by legislatures all over the world is being missed. We just found out from Lamont that the offshore wind isn't going to happen because of inflation in their costs. So we really need to be playing defense here. That's number one. Number two is that as a long-term resident, I've watched the development of South Norwalk along the water. And what's frustrating to me about it is that it's rental housing and it's been gentrifying. It's been moving people out of the community that lives there for decades and letting a bunch of other people come in as renters, which is, it's great to have rental housing, especially affordable rental housing. But if you look right next door in Westport, the properties on the water that are being built are condos, and they're $3 million a piece. So Norwalk as a city would be much better off if it really focused on green development and focused on home ownership and actually enfranchising the people who have lived here for decades in that neighborhood with some set aside. And you could actually make, tiny housing, all kinds of different built solutions that have a green lens on what development looks like, instead of just building these 5-story stick-built rental buildings. I think we have enough of those, and diversity is an asset to every community. So I would really encourage, especially, as things change, also, I really think that focusing on industrial development that is non-polluting and actually taking the opportunity that the Inflation Reduction Act and other legislation has given us to remediate those that are still dirty, as we're going back decades in some cases. Oystering happens to still be a functional industry for our city, and it would be great if we could have more food, seafood-related industries in our industrial zone. So thank you for your time, and I hope you revisit this plan before adopting it so that you can incorporate more new ideas instead of just leaving it in the traditional fashion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Diane,
Wait, before you have the next speaker, I failed because we didn't have everyone here. I assume this is our full house this evening. I'm going to seat Ms. Tabachnik for this item. Okay, please continue.
We have a Garrett F. who will be joining us online. Feel free to unmute now.
Unmuted, yeah,
yep,
hear me?
go ahead.
Great. Thanks everyone for your time. Real quick, I'm against the amendments or changes to the P O C D. No need to go through the myriad of different reasons. I share many of the same sentiments, won't go into that. I'm against it. So wanted that for the record. Number two, I'm a little confused, and I'm hoping that leadership here, Steve, Lou, whoever can and help myself and others understand. Steve, in the last meeting, this is a continuation of, you kind of mea culpa and you said, hey, so sorry, I had omitted language in these, and I may get some of this wrong, Steve, right? So correct me. In this amendment about allowing existing businesses to be maintained on Water Street, example, oystering, marinas, industrial stuff, right? And you said, oh, I'm so sorry, so sorry. It's in there, right? Article released today on Nancy at Norwalk quotes some guy, Alan, and he said, oh, right, if a property's sold, they're no longer allowed to do these things. Now, I have no idea about any of these sources. He said, she said, it doesn't matter. Let's hear it from the source, right? So does this amendment apply to any kind of property on Water Street that's currently industrial, right? That if it's sold, can they no longer, under what you guys are planning or at least proposing to be, I guess, air quote, industrial, right? A marina, an oystering business, some sort of repair facility, right? Can you help me and many other people understand kind of where this is going?
Let me explain this portion of the public hearing. The commission members are here to listen to what you have to say. When all of the members of the public who wish to speak have spoken, Mr. Kleppen can respond to the questions that you've raised.
Fair enough. Hopefully, there's time for that. That's it. Thanks.
Sure.
Diane Lorcella.
Diane, just want to remind you, you spoke at the last hearing, and so you're more than welcome to speak as long as you're speaking about new material.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I first wanted to thank the commission and the staff for allowing this hybrid meeting. I had been speaking with people in the marina who have marinas and boats, and some of them told me they had witnessed, because of what they felt was unfair treatment at the last meeting, that they were afraid to come speak. Now, I think that they should be braver, because I do think this meeting is welcoming and I appreciate the hybrid. But one has to make sure that we have a welcoming spirit every time we have public hearings and meetings. I'm speaking as a private resident. And so that this, first of all, for this commission not to be confused, because of the situation with the Water Quality Committee chairman, at the time, we had a vote about sending a letter. I am on the Mayor's Water Quality Committee. The letter was waiting for Mr. Schnierlein to sign off on it. He had been ill, so he told me, send the letter. And that's what I did today. I'm sorry it came to you later. It contains important and valuable information, but it is part of the group, not me. Tonight, I'm briefly speaking as a private resident. For the record, I have a long time interest in the development and the quality of life, and of course, water quality in Norwalk. For some of the new commissioners, I was the founding president of the North River Watershed Association and chairwoman of Fairfield County Sierra Club, and over the years have helped bring forth and try to educate the public and officials and mayors of every stripe over the last 40 years as to how, if we act on in a progressive way, these challenges we have, flooding, contaminated sites, and we address them, identify them, bring in the right parties and assess and offer resolution, we can move forward. I currently am a private, self-employed environmental consultant. I work with both the development community as well as citizen groups, most recently the South Norwalk Citizens for Justice and some other neighborhood groups. So on both sides of the aisle. And I'm trying to see this from both sides. I think the harbor is a valuable resource that we are finally seeing as such. I was one of the first harbor commissioners under Mayor Bill Collins, because we were under order from the Army Corps to pull back our finger piers, but also to make sure that we look at water quality as well as water quantity into the harbor. And that goes back into the 80s. I wanted to tell you that I have been scratching my head and have had some very moments of kind of coming home and seeing whether all these years I've talked to you about has been worth it. I still think it has. I want to tell you that I agree with all of the speakers that have come before me. And I really appreciate them showing up and being regular defenders of good governance, the environment, and the public's right to know. I wanted to tell you that I have tried since the summer of 2022, when the subcommittee that put together and instructed UTIL, the consultant, to do this industrial waterfront land use study. I spoke back a little over a year ago about the concern about contaminated property and how contaminated properties that are present throughout the study area needed to be identified in some manner and mentioned in a way that does not give the public and the officials that will use this planning document. This is a land use planning document as part of the POCD, maybe, that you cannot give them a false sense of security that all is right. From summer of 2022 to this summer, 2023, I have felt that I was kind of speaking to the proverbial wall, because you will hear in rebuttal of the staff and Mr. Kleppen, I'm going to use words that he's used recently as with the Harbor Commission, when they ask some questions about contaminated sites that they know are along the harbor, that it is a moot point, that it would be irresponsible to mention contaminated properties, that we feel there are no listed contaminated properties, that we sent a staff person by phone to call federal and state agencies who told them that the only list that is available is what is known as the Connecticut and EPA brownfields list. Well, that is false in that, because, and the reason why I wanted to mention it here is it is part of the letters that you received since the 20th. I'm trying to, of course, maintain the request of Mr. Chairman. The DEEP letter from Brian Thompson, who has dominion over the Coastal Management Act, did not mention, but implied, but did not mention specifically the importance of identifying and working with private and public owners of land along the study area to reduce the amount of contaminated property. I will be contacting Katie Dykes, the commissioner, because I did contact Mr. Thompson's senior staff person, Marcy Valent, stating that this is an important part of the study and should be, and it is part of the DEEP's jurisdiction, especially on coastal sites, because when you have flooding, you can wash out and wash away the soil that is contaminated or have collapses of the coastline, as we may have in East Norwalk, and I'll mention that briefly. You will be told in rebuttal that this is not part of your concern with this industrial waterfront study. You would be told incorrectly. Please do not believe it. It is incorrect. You have this is a planning document. If you decide to totally remove any mention of contaminated properties, then I feel you must do a different study and mention in this study that you will be doing a study listing contaminated properties on the waterfront and throughout the city of Norwalk. I have never stated that you must individually list these sites. There are ways to wordsmith, especially if you turn your attention, Mr. Commissioners, on page 44 of your industrial waterfront land use study. The left-hand column under the brownfields section, it states, and it is a false statement, that there are no potential and listed brownfield sites in the study area. That is based upon improper review by UTIL, the staff, and maybe the DEEP that has a lot of new people. If they're not asked the right question, they may or may not tell you the right answer. The best way to find out the myriad of lists that are available, like the state Superfund site, the industrial sites, the underground fuel tank sites, these all have their programs with lists. And there are sites that include Norwalk, and there are sites within this study area. And the only reason I'm mentioning it is because it keeps being used as an excuse as to why the layman commissioners and many officials, including the mayor, are being told by staff that should know better that it is not conducive to this. It's moot. It is not important enough. It is not part of this study. Now, the resolution that you see before you, that was the former resolution, maybe it's been changed, talks about how all of the different talks about the Council Economic and Community Development Committee that approved this study. I attempted to tell the layman council people why it is important to put this study on hold very briefly and have a meeting to discuss why it's important to change the wording on page 44 and throughout the document, especially the test fits, where there are known contaminated properties. They decided to approve it. That is irresponsible. And I'm on record saying that, and I will address it with the council because some of them understand that this is important. Going back to the letter from the state, I was disappointed in the wording, but I understand why. Basically, after 15 pages, they're saying they do not recommend that you consider high density development in the study area, in the floodplain. Now, I know this is a challenge, and I do feel for the staff, including Mr. Kleppen, because they have been charged with trying to find ways to update and create a better waterfront environment, and they have succeeded in many ways. I am professionally and personally happy with the mentioning of buffers, of reducing impervious surfaces wherever possible. And there are numerous other means, and I think those are terrific and of course should remain in this study. But what I don't understand is why the staff have dug their heels in at least 4 times now. They've ratcheted up the insistence that the contaminated sites within the study area are not moot, should not be included, and are saying so on page 44. That is a false statement, and public funds have been used for this study. So I ask this commission, please do not vote to approve the study unless and until there is a meeting of all of the waterfront related committees and commissions, the Harbor Commission, the Shellfish Commission, and the Water Quality Committee, and have a discussion, an adult discussion, instead of broad-based brushing aside people's valuable comments, and we can find a resolution to this. The wording on page 44 has to be changed. Do not approve this tonight. There's a way forward with this. If anything, blame UTEAL, although I'm not sure if they were told not to include it. I don't want to know, but I could find out later. But I just want to ask you, you would be making a grave mistake not including any proper, truthful mention of properties. And you want to go back to the drawing board. There are listed sites in the DEP and the EPA. There's some, as my last example, and I just want to give this to you, the commissioners. The public can see it later. They can talk to me. I don't have a staff, so I had to go to a public copier. In it, it has all the kinds of lists available where I ask the staff to ask the right questions or send UTEAL to Hartford to look up these sites, the list rather, and they'll find sites. Also, I have copies of what was once something called the Brownfields News. I was a member under Mayor Dick Moshe of what was known as the Brownfields Task Force. You have been misinformed about what the phrase brownfield sites are. brownfield sites and the program that the EPA asks for the Department of Economic Development in the state and DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Those are sites that have been identified by a town or city that may want to redevelop. If they don't want to redevelop another area that is still contaminated, it won't be included on the list that you've been given by Michelle and Steve. So don't be misled that that is the only list and there's nothing on it within the study area. That's because the redevelopment agency didn't identify any additional sites, and so they're not on the state list. But there are other state and federal lists that do list sites. And lastly, one site in particular has still not been resolved. It is on the CERCLIS site. And CERCLIS is an acronym used by the federal government called Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Information System. It's a mouthful. It's a alphabet soup. But I wanted just to say that the site listed, and it was listed in 2008, is the Oyster Bend Marina, formerly known as the Donahue property, a drum dump and cleaning site. There are pictures that have been submitted, but also are the police department, the Marine Police, well aware. In 2008, at the time, as a president of League of Women Voters, I asked for a petition that was signed by at least 30 to 40 people. The state of Connecticut, the EPA, the Harbor Commission, Shellfish Commission, the Chamber of Commerce, the City Health Department, some planning and zoning people knew there was a public meeting to discuss the problem. And to my knowledge, what happened was they were digging for and I'm in this business, they were literally, there was a consulting firm paid for by the owner, the current owner, who actually purchased the property with cash. At the time, when you purchase something with cash, it may sneak under the radar for doing a transfer site evaluation and all the forms that are related to it. As Mr. Kleppen keeps saying, it would undergo a transfer act, not always. Also, this person paid cash and then sued the seller, but he did not do his own due diligence, according to the reports. But long story short is that this site, the owner hired a consulting firm that is on the state's list for something called environmental, it's a special list of people that do remediation. To do phase 1 site assessments, you do not have to be on this kind of list. There's all kinds of lists, and it's very confusing and it's very complicated, but UTIL should have explained this all to the staff if they had been allowed. And the thing is, they were digging for the foundation of phase 2 of the condos, and they hit so many drums and drum fragments, they just closed up the site. Those still remain on site, and that is just one of several other sites within the study area. I have listed before, and I'm on record, talking about other sites like the Yankee gas site, and of course the Pepco oil tank farm that is right near Straffolino Bridge. That is still, there are problems with oil that's floating in the groundwater. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is I like to develop sites as green as possible, but if you have someone starting, it's going to delay them redeveloping the site to be the highest and best use and give tax dollars to the city and make it a friendly and welcoming place. I ask that you can reconsider which sites on Water Street and on both sides of the harbor that you need to know where the contamination is so you can help not only plan for public sites, you can help these private owners gain Superfund site assessment monies. A lot of these sites are private sites that the federal government wants the city of Norwalk to work with so that you're aware. Lastly, I just wanted to say, for any public official or body that claims they don't need to know about contamination, and the site at Oyster Bend contains toxic materials that could leach into the water and could leach into our, and affect our multi-million-dollar shellfish business, I think we have to take a pause. And I don't want to hear in rebuttal again from Mr. Kleppen, who I'm sure is ginned up to say it one more time, why you don't need, you layman commissioners don't need to know. Don't look away from this. Don't look behind the curtain. You need to know and address it in better language than the denial you have on page 44. So I'm going to give this out. I will make as many, I have 10 copies here. I would love you for the future, because you'll have other sites that are on these lists. Even if you don't include this in your review tonight, you need this for the future, for your future sites. And I'll give this to the staff to hand out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh,
Anyone else online?
We have
No?
one more signed up.
Okay.
Catherine Snedeker. And if anybody else who hasn't spoke, I think this is the handful anyway, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, Catherine Snedeker, also known as Price Snedeker. I'm a 30-year resident, second generation Norwalk. My father moved here in 1980 to become the superintendent of schools. And one of the things that drew him to Yorkshire
I'm
for this
sorry
job-
to interrupt you. Can you just give us your address?
Oh, sure. Currently 14 Haviland.
Thank you.
I lived for 26 years in Harbor View. I lived for 5 years in Shorefront Park, and I keep moving towards Washington. I'm 1 block away. So my papa moved here in 1980, and one of the reasons why he came to be the superintendent of schools here for 15 years, which I think is the longest running superintendent ever, was because of the waterfront. He got a boat. He raised us as boaters. I had a boat and bought a boat on for Marine Max as a single mom of 3 kids. Wasn't really what I should be doing, but our life is on the water. My kids grew up sailing. My kids grew up boating. I pay for storage in the summer and the winter at Rex Marine. There are so many beautiful parts of Norwalk, but as growing up in South Norwalk and being here, it's Cab's Pasture, it's the harbor, it's I've started my own charter business. It's a woman running in an economic zone. I have my own Norwalk Harbor Tours. So the water is so super important. And I have to tell you, we got the best water. The other day I went up to Fairfield. We don't have any islands. There's nothing, you go up and down the coast. Norwalk is a real jewel. What we have here we developed in a way that Darien did not, because we have this harbor. It is a treasure. And for the last 2 weeks, I have been reading the Norwalk Hour, which I have to say is very impressive, from 1967, January 1967 to December 1969, because I am trying to figure out how Taylor Farm was bought, how Cranberry Park was bought, and found out Cranberry Park was bought because they were going to put Norwalk Community College there. And then it was a switch with Taylor Farm. The history of this place is so fascinating, but it is lost so quickly. I've been trying to find out history, but the Norwalk Hour records what happened. So I'm able to do it. So what you do now will affect generations in the future. It was a 3-person vote that Manresa Island went to become a power plant and not a park. It would have been $2 a family in Norwalk to buy Manresa. And 3 gentlemen sat down and it was 2 to 1. And that became a power plant, which is now a giant bunch of land that's toxic. I think it's $1 million an acre to clean it up. And it sits there because if there hasn't been something determined, they don't have to clean it up. And so the waterfront, it's not just about a couple of streets. It's about the incredible jewel that we have here. And I'm speaking as a resident. I have driven out of Harbor View in Irene, in Sandy, in unnamed storms. And I guess I'm an expert because in the Resilient Corridor report of the 5 photographs from flooding, 4 of them are mine. And I keep going to, and I started with the walk bridge, and the frustration of the walk bridge design made me go back into a hole for a couple of years. So I'm coming back out now, and I've been going to every single meeting, and I'm just frustrated by consultants that don't know the history of Norwalk, don't have photos of the flood. This resilient corridor is built so that Harbor View and Village Creek and Shorefront Park can evacuate through Water Street. No one in those communities is going to drive to Water Street. They're going to drive up towards Rubner Court and drive to the train station. So it's frustrating to me that we seem to be spending a lot of money on consultants who I think are very committed people, but the Norwalk people don't seem to be involved in the history and the larger pieces of the puzzle, like brown sites and like all the other issues that have been brought up. So I guess my overall message is what you do here will carry on. 30 years from now, somebody will be probably reading the Norwalk Hour to see what happened, right? How did we end up in this situation? You have a legacy in the same way I'm reading about people in 1967 that made decisions to buy a farm for the city for $325,000, which was huge at the time, but that gives us 30 acres of open space. So your decisions will live on in history and in the Norwalk Hour. And I think we just really have to understand this, that this harbor is more than just a couple of streets. And having driven out in flooding, it's scary. You know, it's not fun to drive through water and people panic. I spent 2 hours last Friday, and if you want the video, I condensed it to 10 minutes. I now have 262 views of what it's like on Water Street. And people drive through it. You can yell salt water, they're going to drive through it. People walk through it. People with babies drive through. You know, trucks are going back and forth. A fine arts giant 18-wheeler drove through. I see people stuck. So I don't think you can count on people to be smart in flood zones. And I don't think we should bring more people and increase the density. So anyway, thank you. And my father sat in this room and had so much angst over the years. It's not fun being a public servant. I think sometimes he regrets a lot of the time he spent in these meetings, but I hope you don't regret your time here. But I just ask that you look to your long legacy. My father's proud of the things that he did for Norwalk. And in the end, he's glad he did it, but it's a thankless job and there's other places to be than here. So I appreciate the time and effort you put into your job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moria Ratchford, if you can unmute now, please.
Mute. Can you see me or
We can hear you.
you can hear me? Okay. Yeah, I like the previous speaker. Actually, my father was born.
I'm sorry. Can you just give us your name and your address, please?
Yes, my name is Moira Ratchford and my address is 12 Adams Lane.
Thank you.
And actually, that's nowhere near the waterfront. It's a house that my great aunt built in 1940, real close to the highest point in Norwalk. But I am incredibly concerned by this amendment. I am opposed to it. Planning new development along Water Street and other flood-prone areas along the Norwalk River would be completely irresponsible, given the certainty that these areas will be regularly and increasingly flooded. This is due to sea level rise and the huge precipitation events that we can expect to continue getting, just like last week. We got one. Sensible projects would place new development beyond, behind the flood lines, not in a major flood zone. This makes absolute no sense. And I am not understanding why anybody with any common sense would approve this. What will happen if it's approved is that we, the Norwalk taxpayers, we will end up on the hook for the added flood mitigation that will be required. And when there is flooding, for the rebuilding and rescue efforts that will be needed when these developments end up flooded. So the developers, on their end, they will have banked their profits and moved on to their next venture. But the residents of Norwalk will end up with the bill, holding the bag. And that's all I have to say about this. Thank you. Very
Thank you.
short and sweet. Well, maybe not so sweet, but short and concise.
Anyone else on the list, Steve?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? Is there anyone else online who wishes to speak?
Yes.
Okay,
We have a Diana CC, if you please unmute now.
Evening, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Hey, thank you. There's a little bit of a delay there. Diane CC Olmsted Place. And I'll be brief. Probably 3 words said by me never, but I want to say that I agree with all the prior speakers from this evening and from the prior meeting as well. I did read the DEEP correspondence, and quite frankly, I found it to be actually not unlike the Cemetery Street communication, to be a little wishy-washy, and I wish that they would be more definitive in providing a statement that would prompt you folks to reconsider this amendment to the POCD. In addition to that letter, I also read the letter that I believe you received either yesterday or today from Dr. John Pinto, written as a private resident, I believe. And I urge you to go through that and understand the rationale that he's also reiterating what others have said about the concern for this. And I'm concerned with both sides of the harbor. I'm speaking as a private resident, but obviously I and Ian and A have concerns on the East Norwalk side as well as the South Norwalk and Water Street side. One of the things that I do want to say to you is after, hopefully you'll review the new information that you've received and you'll take to heart the communication you've had from the public tonight. I'm not sure that we've heard from anyone really who's in favor of this. And I hope that the concerns of the public will weigh, heavily in terms of your decision on this. And I appreciate the fact that Mr. Kleppen provides you with the staff memorandum and comes to a conclusion. But I think in his efforts to mitigate any concerns that you might have in approving this, because it seems likely, given the history of this commission, that this is something you may all support. When he tries to mitigate those concerns by saying that you're not approving the zoning of these parcels at this point, that you're only making an amendment to the POCD, and that the zoning itself that would allow this type of development and land uses and density and locations are something to be taken up at a later date, perhaps even by another group. I just don't think that that's something that should be considered tonight in terms of when you're trying to understand the impact that your decision is going to have. Because once this thing is an amendment in the POCD, there's really nothing that can stop it to the point that will address all of the concerns that you've heard from experts, the city's own commission and commissioners and residents. And it's really a slippery slope just to get this in as an amendment and then to ask the public and perhaps future commissioners then to say, well, it doesn't really mean anything because, you're not taking up the zoning yet. Obviously, if it's in the POCD, there's going to be an argument to include this development in the new zoning. And someone would be hard pressed to speak against that since it complies with the POCD. And that's one of the most important factors that as the planning side of your commission that you're required to take into account. So be it a staff application or developer application, I think we're going to be in that boat down the road, no pun intended. And I hope that you seriously reconsider this and vote no at this point. And as others have suggested, send it back to the drawing board and do some more homework on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? You have no one else online? No. Okay. Then we will close the public participation portion of the hearing. Mr. Kleppen, I'll turn it over to you. And from there, we'll hold our own discussion.
Sure. So, I had some comments I wanted to address, but then pick up on a few things that were stated. In me dovetailing, I guess, nicely on what Ms. Cece just said, this is just the plan. You're not voting on any zoning related to that. You're voting on amendment to the Plan of Conservation and Development. The plan itself was a city-initiated study to look at the industrial waterfront, which has not been looked at, as well as the zoning, in at least 3 decades. The 1980s was the last time the city took a hard look at what should happen along, Water Street in particular, and for 3 decades has let it sit, and which is probably a lot of the reasons why it's in the state it is today. Another point, and I should have sent this out with my materials. I kind of came across it again today this goes back to August 3rd, 2022 was the last meeting of the committee that was put together to oversee the plan. And 3 of the commissioners that are here tonight seated here tonight were on that group that oversaw the plan. And Dr. Pinto was also there at that meeting. The plan that was basically put forth to council was pretty much, you guys didn't take a formal vote on it because it was an advisory committee, and it's this commission's job to ultimately, approve or deny the plan itself. But that group did agree that the plan that was forwarded on to council was good, was what was in keeping with the intent of the plan. Once it got to the council level, Common Council, which is a governing body, which also has oversight over the POCD, had a differing vision of what they wanted to see in certain portions of the study area, which is why the changes to the plan were made, and is what you have in front of you for consideration now. It's important to also point out that residential use has been an allowed use within the marine commercial zone for 25 plus years. So we're not introducing anything new. It's just trying to change the formula. So there are some positive changes to parts of Water Street. We're not talking wholesale changes on all of Water Street. The main focus area of kind of I'd say the disagreement has been on the northern end of Water Street, which by and large has a lot of vacant properties, or they're being used to park cars, which is not the best use of land, regardless of whether it's on the waterfront or not on the waterfront. Interestingly enough, there's very little mention in a lot of the comments from some of these regulatory bodies about improved water quality there. I understand the concern about increasing density. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And I understand about the concern about losing water dependent uses, both valid issues, but another major item to consider is improved water quality, and the land use activity that occurs along the entire stretch of Water Street does nothing but harm that. And it's just factual based on what's occurring there today. I forgot the gentleman's name. He had a question about if basically it was a question of nonconformity. If you change the zone, does that mean that when there's a new owner that the use goes away? No, that can't occur. That's land use law. A legally non-conforming use can continue in perpetuity regardless of change in ownership. However, that's not really relevant to this conversation because the zoning that is under consideration by the commission allows every one of those water dependent uses to maintain no matter what we change the zone for. So that question can be, the document, the draft zoning document that's online does not have the uses listed correctly. That's just because we haven't updated the draft, but as the commission will recall, at probably 2 or 3 meetings ago, we did talk about the rezoning of the Water Street parcels and including all those water dependent uses. So that was a clarification that we made. So I think that addresses that issue. The deep letter, I thought was, had 2 main areas of concern. One was the increasing density in the flood zone, and the other one was related to the water dependent uses. I'll take them in reverse order because I think the water dependent uses has been largely addressed by the zoning changes the commission put forward, regardless of if at all the zoning changes on those Water Street parcels, they're still going to be required to have some sort of water dependent use that will meet the state definition of that. some of those parcels, particularly on the northern end of Water Street, are not conducive to some of those heavier marine activities. That's just because the navigational channel is very close proximity to the land there. So you really can't have large, I guess, seaward operations there. So it's more conducive to small boating, storage, boat slips, and hopefully public access to the water, because that's something that's missing on all of Water Street right now. And it's the community is completely cut off and has no access to that unless you're a member of one of these clubs. Otherwise, you can't just go down and take a walk, can't sit by the water, can't have a snack, can't do whatever. Regarding the increased development, I think that there were a couple points that when I reading the deep letter that really kind of hit home to me. And I think in kind of piggybacking on what occurred last night, a couple speakers talked about the Circa plan and the Circa meeting last night and the providing that dry access route out. The regulation draft that is not under consideration, but is kind of the side discussion that's occurring as part of this. It talks about requiring dry access on those individual properties. But the point that Deep raised in a phone call with us, and they reiterated it in their letter, which is a really good point, and I don't have an answer for, is that it's fine and good to have the dry access on the individual properties, but if you get onto the public right of way and the public right of way does not provide the dry access, it really doesn't do folks any good that are stuck in that flooding situation. So the summary paragraph at the end of my memo that went out Friday, which I think is also posted online, basically it kind of what it states is the plan is a good plan. The plan makes sense. The plan is, provides a good vision for the future of the city, but it says don't proceed with any upzoning or rezoning of that Water Street area until the city figures out what to do with Water Street. I think the next step after the Circa study is kind of looking at other areas of the city. Water Street has been a flooding concern for decades. The city's kind of known about it. So I think it's probably high time we really take a deep dive into what our options are, what it's going to cost, what's realistic. And then once we figure that out and figure out if it's something the city can, pay for or should pay for, then decide what you want to do with the zoning on the east side of Water Street. I think that that's a sensible approach because there's a lot of other good items, which several of the speakers indicated tonight, that there's a lot of other good items in the plan. In the Water Street section is just one piece of the waterfront that's proposed for rezoning. So, you're talking about Commerce Street area, you're talking about other side up north. So if there's no need to dismiss the other areas of the plan. Lastly, and I'm going to try not to be argumentative with Ms. Lorcella, but I mean, this keeps coming up. I think you spent more time talking about this contamination issue than is warranted. Forgetting the fact of what the data source is, we can talk about that if you'd like, but I think chiefly, even if and as I mentioned last time, I used to do a lot of phase 1 and phase 2 works. I did almost 9 years of that kind of stuff. On every site I investigated, there's always something on the ground you don't expect. Whether it's a warehouse or furniture store, in Danbury, we found three underground storage tanks that nobody knew were there. Each one of them leaked and there was stuff all over the place. So you deal with it when you find it. So I wouldn't shock me if almost every one of those sites has something on there that's buried. Who knows? This could have been an old tank, a drum, could be anything. But every single one of those sites can get developed today, whether you guys change the zone or not. Something could happen here. This same conversation came up with the Cemetery Street application about the impacts to the pond, and maybe you shouldn't do anything because of the impacts of the pond. Well, if they just simply repave that parking lot, you're disturbing the site. If they develop as of right, which would be the same scenario on Water Street, they're going to disturb the soil. And if there's no property transfer, so say somebody with deep pockets comes in and just pays cash, there's no contingencies, there's nobody telling them you have to do the phase 1 or phase 2. If they dig up that site, which they could do as of right with very little oversight from the city, if they proceeded down that path and they find something, they're obligated to notify the appropriate authorities and take the appropriate measures to A, remove the contamination, secure the site, and make sure there are no impacts on the water course. That doesn't mean there might not be an issue if somebody puts a shovel in the ground, but altering the planning document's not relevant. This planning document is a land use plan. It's not the whole overarching harbor management plan. It's just dealing with what are the uses that the city wants to see on these parcels going forward. And it's a, minimum of a 10-year forward look. And if you take a pause on the zoning of Water Street, that probably extends it out even farther. I think that's all I needed to say. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. If you have any documents you want us to pull up, Amelia can hopefully help me out with that.
Commission members have any questions for Steve? Please go ahead.
Right, I do have a question.
And then Tammy.
Right,
Right.
in regards to last night's presentation by Circle. It seems as though they are recommending not just infrastructure mitigation with their streets, with elevating the streets and.
JJ, I'm sorry, can you just put the mic closer to you because I can't hear you? Sorry.
Sure.
Thanks.
But then you won't be able to see me.
Okay.
Maybe it'll bend around. The microphone might.
Okay.
I know you want to be heard.
Yes, I want to be heard. I also want to be seen.
Okay.
Better?
Yes.
Okay, so I was at the presentation last night, very good presentation. And it kind of scared the bejesus out of me in regards to how we're going to plan for increasing floods, more damage to our coastline, more emergency activation for the citizens and more money that's being poured into this. So my question is, in regards to all the notes that I took and all the people who spoke, I'm just wondering, what is the cost of making sure that we are prepared to preserve our harbor and coastline versus welcoming in new development? And I don't know, it seems like, is it worth, what you are proposing as far as developing and bringing in more density, and without first shoring up our streets and our harbor and making sure that the damage for more flooding is not going to really, not just the shoreline, but seep more into the city. Like, we're going to be paying more to fix this. Why not do this now before it gets worse?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think what I stated earlier, my recommendation would be to pass the plan, because the plan has a lot of good salient points that'll be helpful, but not implement any revisions to the zoning for the Water Street area until the city figures out what to do on Water Street. Now, again, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself when I state this, that the city could choose to do nothing with Water Street and leave it as is. And then maybe then the Water Street zoning, thank you. Then the Water Street zoning, maybe it never changes. Maybe the city decides to do something like what's indicated in the plan at the Concord and Burritt, where they raise an intersection, similar to what the city already has done with Raymond and Day Street. Or the city could choose to look at raising all of Water Street. And again, what I think for you people who saw the Circa study last night, if you raise it to the 10-year storm level, it has a certain impact. And obviously with that, it has a certain cost. if you raise it, significantly more to get out of, say, the 100-year flood, that has more impact and more cost. So the city has to weigh the pros and cons, and the city has to determine, do we need to do this for the existing properties and the existing residents anyway, regardless? Or if they decide, maybe they take an in-between approach where they say, we can improve this intersection and this helps secure a safe route out for certain groups. Or they could say, all right, we'll go to this level. And if you folks want to develop Water Street, you're going to pay to implement the rest of this. So that's another option that the city will have to think about. But the next phase is kind of taking that circuit plan and then really digging into what it means for each street. Because as they talked about last night, they don't know exactly what pipe is under this road and what it's going to cost to raise the catch basin up. Well, all those things have to get looked at a pretty detailed engineering level.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I'm just wondering, at this point, since this is all in the planning stage and no decision has been made, can we put a pause on this until we know more?
Yeah, I think you put a pause on the zoning because I think that's where things get implemented. Because right now, Water Street has uses, they have an existing zoning designation where people can do things on their property that they're not doing today. So none of that changes under the proposal. I think where the concern comes in is if you incentivize the zoning more to add more density, that's where you might be adding people and not addressing the flooding. So I would say the plan is fine. This is me speaking again. You can approve the plan, but then say we are not going to approve the zoning at this stage. And I didn't send it out, but I added another clause to the draft resolution that went out 2 weeks ago that I'll bring up that states that. So that way it's on record that the commission is going that direction.
Thank you, Steve.
Tammy, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Steve, you kindly sent me the contaminated properties list and it basically gave a street address and there were about 29 properties that were identified in Norwalk and about 20 or 21 of them Water Street, Day Street, Raymond, Monroe in the general South Norwalk Water Street vicinity. And it seems to me, without having actually gone from a survey property map back and forth on all those 21, that it's really where Washington Village was, and it is not anymore. And maybe that's what you were referring to. And when that whole development was done and they started digging, maybe they found some of these contaminated barrels or what have you, but it's all been built over. And so do they, because you were kind of implying that there weren't any brown sites, whatever you want to call them, contaminated sites, did you say that because you believe they were all built over when the Harbor Point development went in that whole area there on Water Street and Day and Raymond, et cetera?
So when I'm talking about listing the sites as part of the plan, I'm referring to the parcels that are within the study area. So, where the Soundview Landing project was not part of the study area, so that perhaps there was something there. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they found, when they started doing work, like I said, they start digging up soil and then, oh, here's another underground storage tank we didn't know about. And then they got to stop, assess the extent of any contamination, clean it up and move forward. But that's pretty, a lot of it depends too on the type of contamination there is. Some things like oil and gas, believe it or not, are easier to clean up in some extent because they float, or other kinds of chemicals sink or they bind to the soil differently. So it really all depends on what you're dealing with.
And so one doesn't necessarily know exactly what the contamination is until it starts being redeveloped.
That's very possible. If it's not a listed site and they don't do, so if a project triggers the Transfer Act, or if it's going to get financed, more than likely they're going to have to poke holes in the ground to see what's there, and they'll sample the soil, they'll sample the water. If somebody was going to just privately finance it, they might not have to go that route, or they may not choose to go that route. And then if they start construction and they find something, then they're going to have to address what they've heard.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman, not every site is a Transfer Act site.
As I
I'm
mentioned.
sorry,
Not the only
public, the public portion, the public portion is over. You cannot speak any further.
For the fourth time, where he's misinforming you.
No,
This is not the only list in the study area, and he knows it, and if he doesn't know it, then it's worse than misinforming you. I'm sorry.
and whether there's 20 other lists, that list,
As you were saying.
thank you. Whether there are 20 other lists that have different sources of data, the bigger point is it's not relevant to the plan. If there's contamination on the site, it has to get dealt with one way or the other. We're doing a land use plan to figure out what the best uses are on these properties. We're not doing an environmental assessment of the Norwalk Harbor. That's not what this study was about.
And then, to continue.
Go ahead.
Couple more. And then if, have we considered just breaking out the water section, below the Straffolino Bridge and putting that portion on hold and letting the north part of the river move forward with Commerce Street, et cetera?
That's what I'm recommending.
Okay. Anna, Galen, Mike, any of you wish to speak? Mike, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Was there someone else that was ready to go?
No.
Go ahead, Mike. I'll
So
go after.
I want to just say that there's a lot of misinformation around this subject. And I think a lot of it came from the mistake, which staff apologized for in terms of not including the uses that were traditionally marine commercial in the new list, shown as not permitted, right, NP. And that was an oversight that staff apologized for, but I see that a lot of reaction in the letters that came from various other commissions were responding or reacting to that omission. And that those, and that there was a lot of fear that the city was intending, or at least the planning and zoning department was intending on replacing water dependent uses with high density residential. And that is not, that's not true. Currently, as Mr. Kleppen said, residential is allowed in marine commercial in current zoning. And is that correct, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is not adding a use that doesn't exist already. And the one of the things that I am always frustrated by is that every time we get a letter from DEEP, it states the law, which it's required to do. The law was written and approved, written in 1979 and approved in 1980 when Jimmy Carter was president. The law is obsolete. It does not mention resiliency. There is no word resiliency in the law that the current state staff at DEEP has to enforce. And the city of New York, for example, after Hurricane Sandy flooded, big portions of New York City, they decided to start a whole planning process that lasted 9 years. And they had millions of dollars of consultants and experts coming in. And they decided in New York City, which 20% of New York City is in the 100-year floodplain, millions of people live in the 100-year floodplain, 18,000 businesses, I believe, if I'm quoting it correctly, are in the 100-year floodplain in New York City. Or we could even just look at Westport. All of downtown Westport is in the 100-year floodplain. And they just built a $100 million project called Bedford Square. It opened in 2018. It's where Anthropology is. Their garage underneath is underneath the water table, actually below the water table. Their 2-story garage under the building. It was all designed to be resilient. If there happened to be a storm surge in Westport, which there may be, and I'm sure it's inevitable, the project would recover quickly because all utilities, et cetera, are above the floodplain. Same thing with Soundview Landing, to bring it back home to Norwalk. Soundview Landing was approved in 2012 under the previous administration and was held up with a lawsuit for a while. But when that project was designed and approved, it was approved to be resilient. It was designed that there would be no physical damage from a flood. It would be basically hosed out. The garages would be hosed out. The cars, with a storm threat coming, all of the residents would be notified. It's in an evacuation plan, and they would park in the Yankee or the Maritime or the Sono train station garage. And then commuters would have to make way for the people that are moving their cars from Soundview Landing. But Soundview Landing is designed, there's nothing that would be damaged by water below the flood level. So the entire first floor is all concrete. There are no utilities, there's no electrical outlets, there's no plumbing. Everything is designed to flood and then be washed out. None of that concept is in the deep or the Coastal Area Management Act of 1980 in Connecticut. It needs to be updated because we're not talking about filling in a salt marsh on Water Street, for instance. You know, it's not a pristine, wild environment, which a lot of the Coastal Area Management Act deals with. It is a urban environment that's been, you know, utilized by human beings for, I mean, let's just say, original inhabitants certainly were there 10,000 years ago, but let's say European settlement for 300 years. It's been an active location for various industries, shipbuilding, factories, et cetera. And one of the best caps for a building, according to the EPA, is a building. If you build on top of contaminated soil, you put in extra membranes, and the building is a cap. This came up on the BJ site, which is still not built, but on Main Avenue, it was stated on the record at the time by experts in environmental remediation that that building would act as a cap. It was going to be built as a cap, and it would be the best way to deal with that Superfund site would be to cap it with a building. And then there would be vents that would be monitored, which there are there now, but they would continue to be monitored, and the building would be monitored for any volatile air pollution as well. But it would be, they would use rubber membranes under the foundation, et cetera. So the building is a best cap for a contaminated site. And that doesn't include the seawall, which would have to be, you know, rebuilt. But I'm just bringing all this up is that there was lots of mention of superheated water carrying contaminants into the Sound if these sites were to be developed with residential use. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because all the new projects are approved by DPW and follow the new stormwater management, the stormwater management standards, which are state mandated, and all of the new construction that would be on the waterfront or anywhere in Norwalk have to keep the water on site underground and let it slowly leach out. There's no outflow of superheated or polluted water. So water quality actually does improve with development, which would be a big improvement over what's there now. Water Street is a disaster, and I agree that that should be pulled out. But we have many projects in Norwalk that are built in floodplains. So I already mentioned all of downtown Westport, but every and you know, big parts of Sono are in the floodplain. But we don't hear any of this opposition when it's a $2 or $3 or $5 million house in Rowayton or in Marvin Beach or in Shorefront Park. We don't hear this opposition. Why is it only when high density residential comes into the picture is all this opposition come out? Is this opposition to apartments more than opposition to building in the floodplain? I just asked that question rhetorically because We have not seen, we've had hundreds of these applications for raising houses, et cetera. And that's all resilience. That's all resilient architecture and resilient development. It's done on a small scale. It's one single family house, but it's all built to flood in. There's floodgates, it floods out, you hose down. There's no damage, there's no potential liability by the city because they are following all of the standards that are state and federal standards for building in a flood zone. The New York City, I'll go back to that for a second. On May 12th, 2021, they passed their city council passed the zoning for coastal flood resiliency. And that was after 9 years of study. That allows building in floodplains all over New York City that demands or requires quick recovery. So, and that doesn't deal with things like Water Street flooding, it's right. So, and I was at that presentation last night and there was a little misinformation earlier in the meeting. Someone was talking about they were only planning to the 10-year zone. I think Diane, my friend Diane said that, and it was, or the 10-year flood, but that was for 2050. So they had planned those streets for the 10-year flood in 2050 with a 20-inch sea level rise. And that's where they came up with the 9.5-foot level that they needed to reach with all these streets, which resulted in a 3-foot raising of Water Street for a good portion of it. And then I believe a 28-inch in another part of their study section. Anyway, I'm rambling on now, but I'm just saying that they did determine a 2050 10-year storm, and they were accounting for that. I guess the last thing I want to say is there was something mentioned about gentrification and apartments. Soundview Landing is as diverse as anything in the city. It has 1/3, I believe 137 units are affordable, deed restricted, subsidized housing. And that when they build an apartment building, it's not all people that look different than who's already there. These buildings, a lot of them are naturally diverse. They have affordable housing inside of them with 10% requirement, but a lot of people that live in the new apartment buildings are not from outside. They're from our own community. They're housing options. We have a housing shortage. And the quickest way to gentrify Norwalk is to slow down the building of apartments in the middle of a housing crisis. You will gentrify Norwalk so fast, we will be a bastion of the wealthy. And I know there's a lot of people that want that and want to see that in the future, but that's not what the city planning and zoning department wants to see. That's not what city leaders want to see. They don't want to see people driven out of Norwalk by such high prices for housing that you can't afford to live here. So a statement made earlier that, oh, we don't need any more apartment buildings on Water Street because it's going to drive out local people. I mean, the apartment buildings actually have a lot of local people living in them to a much higher standard with much better amenities than substandard housing that the buildings are often replacing. And that if, certainly with Soundview Landing, when Washington Village was replaced, all of the people in Washington Village were offered places in the new building. Some of them decided to move and took vouchers to move elsewhere, but the majority of the people in Washington Village ended up in a much nicer, supervised, safer, beautiful building in Soundview Landing. So that was just a fallacy I want to correct on the record. And I think that pretty much covered. Oh, so I think that the fact that the Harbor Commission and the Water Quality Commission have routinely approved single-family homes all over Norwalk for years without any opposition. Suddenly, when there's density mentioned, there's all this opposition. So I'm just going to offer, without trying to be rude or anything, that what is the opposition to? Is it if it's development in the floodplain, then the standards should apply to single-family homes as much as anything else, right? And that's not the case. And certainly cities around us are building in floodplains. all coastal cities in Connecticut are building in floodplains. We're using resilient techniques that are up to date, and we are dealing with an old Coastal Area Management Act law that doesn't have the word resiliency in it. That's my main point. So I just want to bring that up. I'm glad to hear that Water Street's going to be excluded from zoning changes at this point, because obviously Water Street has to be dealt with. It seemed like there was a lot of attention paid to that, but Head of the Harbor South, which has been built, is all built to resilient standards. It's got a parking garage that could be washed out with a hose again after a flood, with no physical damage to the building. And so you can't just stop building in the floodplain in a coastal city, but you have to build to resilient standards. I'll stop. I've taken way too much time, but I just wanted to get all those things onto the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Anna?
Hi, yeah. This is complicated for me. I've been trying to understand it. Been asking a lot of questions of staff. I've been reading the documents and reading all the letters coming in. And apologies if my questions betray that confusion. So I would agree that based on what I've heard so far, whether it's building to what's currently allowed in terms of residential or higher density or lower density, the infrastructure work should happen first, that the city is talking about, that the Circa study talked about. So I would certainly be supportive of putting some sort of restriction in place with changing the zoning or even suspending building residential in that area until that is fixed. I wanted to make sure that I understood the currently allowed residential density is 1 unit per 2,000 square feet, and the proposed level of density for 5W is 1 unit per 500 square feet. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, I'd have to double check the existing, but the 5W is 1 per 500.
Okay. Is there any middle ground there? Is there any reason to think that making it 1 per 1,000 or 1,500 would get us the actual turnover of the properties, or not turnover, but building on the properties, making the properties more sustainable, impervious surfaces, all of that, than what we currently have? Like, how do we know 500 is the right number?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know unless we did like a separate analysis. You know, probably we'd need to bring in an outside firm to look at the numbers, but the 1 per 500 numbers, the standard that we typically apply for the more dense multifamily areas.
Okay. And then this a little bit goes to what Mike was talking about. If, according to what DEEP is saying, any residential use in the floodplain is out of line with the Coastal Management Act, then why aren't we considering changing the current zoning to remove all residential uses as a possibility, which kind of goes along with why is it allowed in other things that are in floodplains, Rowayton, Westport, et cetera. Was that ever a consideration? Do other cities that are building in the floodplain get these same letters from DEEP? And it's just a given that you're going to get this letter from DEEP, but everybody knows that Nick is nodding his head. Does that mean yes, that happens? Or I don't know.
Yeah,
I'll stop talking for a second.
Sure, I'll answer that question very carefully.
Okay.
Yes, other communities do get letters. I don't know if I sent out to you guys the letter that New Haven got. New Haven is going with a massive densification right along their coastline, very in close proximity, 4 times as dense as what we're proposing. They got a letter very similar to DEEP. As mentioned, Westport, we talked to New London, and Michelle in our office talked to one other community as well. So they all, you know, DEEP is doing the same review. It's important to point out that DEEP is advisory. They don't, you know, trigger anything in additional on your vote. And you know, they're working off what the existing statute says. Yeah, I think it would be a really good idea to update that statute, but they are working off what the existing regulations say. I guess that answers that.
That letter seemed pretty clear and scary. And like, I don't know, it's bizarre to me if this is sort of the standard response and people just ignore it because it seems like something that maybe shouldn't be ignored.
Well, the only thing which I didn't answer to your question was that it was stated though, is that, think about, we had mapped this previously and shown this at prior meetings, is that a huge chunk of South Norwalk which is, one of the things that drew Circa to do the study was the fact that we have a train station that's right in proximity to where we, are targeted to develop because of its proximity to the train station. So
Right.
the floodplain is there. You can't ignore it. You don't, economically, it would be really difficult for the city to just say, we're not going to do any development of any type within the floodplain. The floodplain's there. We're going to have to deal with water. I think one of the people that spoke at the Circa meeting last night said that, they know when the high tides are going to be. They know there's going to be a certain amount of time during the day when they're not going to be able to get out of their house, that they're going to have to plan their trips around that. So it's not like we can, we're not going to be able to wall off the city and prevent the water from coming in. We're just going to have to accept that it's going to come in. It's going to we have to try to figure out where it's going to go, where we want to try to stop it from going. And then if and where we allow the development to occur, make sure it's built to the best standards possible to make sure people that live there are safe. And if there's a serious storm event, that they can get out of there safely.
Okay, thank you. I understand that it would be economically infeasible for the city not to have any development in these areas, and I see the benefit of development in the areas. Is there anything that could be done with the areas in terms of development if there were no residential uses allowed, which seems to be what the implication of the deep letter is, that if anything, we should be rolling back the current residential use? What would that look like? Could that happen? Was that something that the city discussed, the economic subgroup of the council or whatever?
No, but during the, again, I could point you back to the study itself and then the meetings with the consultants on this. The consultants, and I think I hinted at it in one of my memos as well, is that zoning is a tool. Sometimes zoning is meant as an enforcement tool, but it can also be used as a tool to bring about change. And in this case, when you increase the parameters, allowing somebody to invest in their property, you can change the equation on the ground. So what we tried to craft with the zoning was, if you're going to change, we're going to let you build more. We've done this in other areas, not exclusive to the waterfront, when we've done upzoning before. If East Norwalk TOD is a perfect example. If you're going to, we're going to give you more height and more density, but in exchange for that, you're going to give us these things that we want in return. And it's just a question of what those items are and how you list them.
And we can't just require those things without giving people more height and density.
Some things, yes, some things, no.
Okay.
You have to ask
Second.
yourself, Anna, why have people
Yeah.
not done it to date, right?
Well, that's what I'm
That's the
wondering. I
big
mean,
question, is why
yes,
have
but
people not
also
done it?
if, I agree.
The
Like, why have
economics
they not done
are
it to date? And if we allow X, Y, and Z, how do we know they're still gonna do it then?
Well, you
and
don't,
like-
but you have potentially more controls in place if they can't do it unless they do the other thing.
This other stuff.
Today, those other things do not exist.
Gotcha. Can you please just let me be in a meeting? Okay.
You know, it came up in
So-
resiliency conversations about like, why don't you just make it all a park, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Right. Why would the city be
has
interested in
the-
buying all the land and making it a
With
park
funding.
with a boardwalk?
But with what money?
Yeah, no, I know.
Billions of dollars are gonna magically fall out of what tree to buy the entire waterfront? If someone has it and wants to do it, I'm sure, fantastic, go start buying properties because they exist.
Right.
If I may interject, just a vision I have, a dream, is to take those two properties just south of the Struffolino Bridge. Well, there's a building there now, just south of that one. It's the two that are closest to the channel. They're empty lots. And make that another park. We have a new park going in after the walk bridge is done, north of the Struffolino. Half that park is actually going to be parking lot, but it's going to be there's a pavilion, et cetera. It's actually, it's a very nice park. There's a dock. It's where that aquarium boat is docked now, that parking lot at North Water Street. So I would do a similar vision just south, just because you guys are talking about it, and have a 2 or 3 acre park there on the water with a boardwalk, and then with a food truck parking area, so that all these people come down and have, can get all this variety of food like they have in New Haven on the water off the highway there. And I forget what they call that, but it's like.
But that's one of the options listed in the industrial waterfront study, right?
Let's not get hung up on personal visions here.
Well, I think but it's worth mentioning in terms of if that can happen with development, because if developers will pay for that, then that is an option, right? So we did this with the industrial study where we incentivized current small manufacturers and auto body shops, et cetera, like in East Norwalk. We gave them some right to build residential so that they could subsidize their business, so keeping their business and the jobs intact, with the ability to basically what's the word that we use for that when we you incentivize, but you're monetizing the property. You're giving it more value so that potentially you could save the current use with just somebody could have 4 or 5 apartments on top that could then subsidize their business on the first floor. We've already done that in the city. And I saw this as a potential. We didn't hear from any marina owners in this. I'm sorry, Hannah, I'm talking so much when you had the floor, but it was just so important of a fact in that the marina owners, if they start struggling, let's say boat sales decline for some reason, interest rates keep going up. Right now, they're selling lots of boats, apparently, from what I've heard. But let's say the marina industry goes into a decline, and we want to save that marina industry because it's a water-dependent use. And they could save themselves if they could build a little strip of apartments out on the front of Water Street, let's say, potentially. And then it would allow the businesses to succeed and survive well into the future. That is a potential monetizing of the property to allow the water-dependent uses to continue, not to be replaced. Point made. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you. And I appreciate the conversation because I was not on the commission a year ago when this came through the group at that time. So in that scenario, though, that marina could also be incentivized just to sell to somebody who wants to build residential and maybe have some different type of water dependent use, but we could lose the type of marina and boat stuff and yacht clubs that are there now, correct?
Yeah, if there's permitted use to some extent, yeah, it's hard to control the market in that.
Because people can do what they want, and it would still require water dependent use, but it might be a different water dependent use.
Yeah.
So like, do we increase the likelihood of losing boating access, the current type of water dependent uses that we have, by making these changes?
It depends on the scope of the changes that you approve, as I recommended, leaving the Water Street piece out. I think then it would not alter that equation at all. But then looking at Water Street, it's completely different on the north half versus the south half. The south half is where you have the, bulk and intensity of the boating operations, and that zoning was really never, particularly on the water side, always maintained or always recommended to be very water dependent heavy.
Okay, and I think this is my last question. Again, thank you for your patience. The proposal to leave Water Street out, or you said that you had redrafted the thing. Does that come after we theoretically approve the POCD amendment, or is that part of that somehow?
So if we get to the taking action stage of this, we'll pull up a resolution and we have some language that states that. So it's on the record that you are approving the plan. However, you are not moving forward on any rezoning of the Water Street area until such time as the city comes up with a plan and addresses what to do on Water Street. And as I said before, that could
Yeah.
mean you never do anything on Water Street, or
Sure.
it could mean you do
Is that
partial.
binding on future, commission? Like, if the members of this commission change, if you leave, is that binding?
Technically, no. I mean, I think that they would be having the same conversation. You could get 10 people with 10 completely different opinions and visions on what they want to do altogether, but
But Anna, that's
Thank
true
you.
of approving the new zoning regulations.
Right, things can always be
New
changed.
commissioners can come in and alter what we've done. That's just
Yeah.
fact of life.
Gotcha. And if we don't approve this POCD amendment, the 5W and 4W sort of plans for all these areas cannot happen, or they could still happen?
technically it could. I mean, the idea of amending the POCD first before you do the zoning is, and some of the speakers address this, is when you endorse the plan or incorporate the plan into the POCD, you are kind of providing that nexus between the planning and the zoning.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hopefully two quick
Go ahead,
questions.
Nick.
Steve, I was just curious about the stormwater management concept. Like, what authority does the commission have over sort of the stormwater management or issues in the city? Anything? I was just
On
confused
any
by that.
application? So
That's on any application, right? Is there any broader thing than application by application?
the city does through the Public Works Department. So they're the group that does all the technical reviews. A lot of times as requirements, and whether it's a site plan or special permit application, they're required to show the stormwater management. And, it's same thing with like traffic.
Mhm.
The P and Z department doesn't necessarily do the traffic review. We might
Right.
weigh in on certain things, but there's a technical review done by another group, but then you're the body that says, okay, this other group is satisfied and we agree with their determination or with their changes or whatever.
That makes sense. And the other question is around sort of just insurance, and I know this has come up a lot around like FEMA insurance and rates and things like that down within the flood zone. And I think we all see the writing on the wall, like underinsured problems are going to happen across the board. You see Florida dropping people left and right. But does us building potentially in the flood zone increase or decrease at all the FEMA insurance rates or anything like that? I don't know if they're connected in any way. I didn't think so, but
I don't want to answer because I'm not positive.
But Nick, my guess is it has more to do with what's going on nationally.
Yep.
I don't live anywhere near the flood zone. I live in Silvermine, and my FEMA rate just went up
Went up as
about
well.
30%.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Could I make some comments?
Yeah,
I
sure,
only
of
got to
course.
ask questions.
No,
Some
go-
people have made
go
comments,
ahead.
So I think I would like to.
Sure.
Okay, I think as we think about this whole zoning rewrite, which is really coming into play here, water dependent use, flood zone, urbanization, too much housing, not enough housing. There are a lot of things to consider. And some people have spoken tonight about, well, we approve raising houses, single family houses that are by the water. Well, that's kind of what the city direction is, and the FEMA direction is that you get the house out of the, lower elevation, whatever it's 12 or 13 feet, you raise it up. That's been the suggestion. And if we don't talk just about Water Street for a moment, but you talk about other water dependent uses that could be developed into residential, Cove Marine could become condominiums, let's just say, or apartments. Nothing wrong, more housing. But there goes a water dependent use. In East Norwalk, that's the only place that really has a lot of boating, or then right down on Seaview Avenue. There's a lot of boating there. There really isn't much opportunity to put housing right there, but say where Harbor Lights is. Do you want all of those boating opportunities to go away? The same thing could happen on the west side of the river in the Village District of Rowayton. Over the last 20 years, there used to be 5 marine dependent uses along the 5 Mile River. There are now 2. The The other properties, the other three have become condominiums. Much to the dismay of many of the residents there. Yes, they're expensive properties, but that's like the creep. And that really has nothing to do with the flood zone. The flood zone directed from FEMA to get your properties out, okay, fine. But I think the people that have written against these changes are very concerned about water dependent use. People don't have to live on the water, but I think you separate single family dwellings versus large developments because they're more commercial in general. And if those water dependent uses, the creep happens and sooner or later they're gone, well, then we don't have any water businesses left in Norwalk, and people like that. That's part of the reason they come here. Somebody was talking earlier, how beautiful our natural resources are. We have the Norwalk Islands, and it makes our community kind of unique. Sure, people want to live by the water, but if you can't get your boat in the water, you can't get your boat fixed at the water, you can't get fuel for your boat at the water, and the oystering can't happen and the fishing can't happen, we lose those water dependent uses. You know, then what are we? We're just a bedroom community. And I think our heritage, as some people were mentioning, it's really important to have those water dependent uses. The whole South Norwalk has been highly developed around the train station. There is building that isn't in the flood zone right by the train station. And, you know, is it our bad luck as a city that, you know, we're getting more frequent storms or the water levels are rising? It is too bad. So why would we put more people in harm's way? The single family houses that people are lifting out of the flood zone are already there. Why would we add more housing in these flood prone areas? So I think it's not just so easy about one little section. You have to look at the city as a whole, even though we are specifically seeming to focus on the Water Street and upriver as well. But the fact that these large water events seem to be occurring more frequently, you know, that should give us some pause, and maybe, like Mike was saying, the rules ought to be changed. The deep legislation, maybe those things should be changed. But they're not right now. But what we are doing here is going to last for a long time. And I think our water dependent uses should kind of trump that residential development. But then you go back, why are those properties at the top of Washington Street not developed? I don't know. Did anybody pick up the phone and call those owners and say, hey guys, why have you left those there?
We talked to every one of them.
And what did they say?
Well, the ones on, like you said, there's a lot of reasons to divide the north to south. I'm just on Water Street specifically, because we can pull up a map if we want to go.
Yeah, no, the 60, 80 and 90, whatever, you had the numbers listed in your thing. I can pull them up.
The parcel depths on the northern properties, for the most part, are very shallow. They're not deep. And then when you get to the water side of that, the navigation channel is very close. You can't have the big boat docks and all those things. It just won't fit. You can't do it there.
Like right by 68 and 70 and 90. Okay.
And then when you go south, the properties are much deeper and the channel is further out. So you have more opportunity on land and you have more opportunity in the water. Just to comment on what you said, because it's a good point. The zoning recommendation for the southern piece of Water Street that's also in the plan is to allow, not as dense as being talked about the northern half, but allow more development on the street side, on the land side, but absolutely require the water dependent use in the backside. And it goes right to the point that you made, that the idea, and I think Mike mentioned the same thing, is to provide a monetary incentive to keep those truly water dependent uses, so they can get some capital out of their property by fixing up the street side, but the backside has that water dependent use. Now, not everybody's going to do that, but it provides another incentive for somebody to do.
And today, there's no requirement that any pieces need to have that water dependency. Is that correct?
No, those properties have to have a water dependent use, but
Today?
yeah, so there is a different, there's a definition in the statute of water dependent use, so it can
Gotcha.
run the gambit of boat repair, dock repair, boat storage, public access. So when you think about going north, when the parcels are smaller and that doesn't have the opportunity to do the big boating operations, that public access component becomes more of a realistic and probably better thing for the community.
That's something to look at, Tammy, too, is like, what do we define that?
Yeah.
Use as,
And-
so you get both pieces of it.
Sure, and
I-
park access, you can walk across the Straffolino Bridge and go into Veterans Park and you have a lot of water access right there. You have boat, individual pleasure boat access versus perhaps marine use, like industrial use, if you will, boat fixing, dock repair, stuff like that, where public access, just an individual wanting to get to the water can walk right across the bridge and have a lot of access. I mean, it's true.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Can I make a comment? Mike here.
Go ahead, Mike.
The other thing, it is a dream, a vision, but it's important to be part of this conversation. Is I was thinking of models for what that northern part of South Water Street would look like, just south of the Straffolino Bridge, where the channel is close to the bank or the bulkhead, where there won't ever be a big marina there. Also, the currents are really strong there too, by the way, because the river narrows. This came up in discussion of the park by the walk bridge. Someone who spoke tonight brought it up about a kayak launch there would be really difficult because the current is forced through the narrow river, the tide changes, and it's really dangerous. But in any case, Wilmington, North Carolina, and Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard, both have boardwalks lined with restaurants at different price points. So you can get a burger or you can get a $50 steak. But it's a very attractive thing that Norwalk does not have, which is waterfront dining, except for Sono Seaport, which is very popular and fun, Harbor Lights, and which is very popular and fun, and Sunset Grill seasonally. But think of a city of 90,000 people that has 3 restaurants, maybe on the water. There might be a couple more that I missed. I think Rowayton Seafood. So let's include that one. But we have a really lack of fun waterfront activity that could be energized by this potential zoning, because no one is going to build a restaurant on a dock I think independent of some other portion of the building going to residential. So if you were to incentivize those 2 properties where I just said earlier, it might be a nice park at great expense to taxpayers, but to have a boardwalk with food trucks, but you could have a row of restaurants there, an extension of the boardwalk from the aquarium it could fit just under the Straffolino Bridge with head clearance like they did in Bradenton, Florida. You walk under a bridge, it's like 7 feet. They have a river walk that's really cool, and it goes underneath a drawbridge. Anyway, you could connect the waterfront all the way from the aquarium under the bridge and down that area, where it could change everything, because suddenly you have a draw of waterfront restaurants that would draw more people into town on weekends and evenings, and also benefiting the other restaurants on Washington Street. So, because you would have, whenever you have a critical mass of restaurants, you get a lot of people coming to eat because they know it's a destination. But that's such a shame that waterfront in that area is so neglected and so underutilized, and there's so much potential there. And I think that's what was driving the economic development portion of this conversation with the Common Council, was that we would like to see an activated boardwalk with restaurants there that would go all the way down to Sono Seaport. It would never go further south than that, because a marina cannot have very easily anyway a waterfront access, a boardwalk, because you would interrupt all of the cranes and the boats coming in and out and the private docks, etc. But you could at least get 1,000 feet of new activated waterfront in Norwalk, which would be pretty awesome. And that this zone change, even though we're going to keep Water Street out would potentially create incentives to do that and see that vision realized, realizing that all of this would be resilient and recoverable after a storm with by everything just being out of the flood zone. And you know how you do that with a restaurant, perhaps those sites need to all be raised by 3 or 4 feet to get them out of the periodic flooding. But you know, most of the flooding on Water Street doesn't come over land. It comes out of the storm drains when the tide goes up. It bubbles up out of the storm drains, whereas the marinas are dry. It's just Water Street itself that's very low there. And I've rarely seen water actually in any of those properties on Water Street. It's just in Water Street itself. So that's my final thoughts on this subject, but I thought I would bring that up.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments?
Me?
Oh, go ahead, JJ.
Okay, so Mike, thank you very much for mentioning Wilmington, North Carolina. That is actually where my mother is from, and I will be going back there come November. And you're right, they do have a wonderful waterfront with restaurants and fun things to eat. And that would be great if we could have something like that here in Norwalk. But before we imagine, you know, the future of this, we also have to address what we currently are going to build on top of. And so once again, I just want to put it into the record that I feel that more research should be done as far as the foundation and the infrastructure before any other building goes on, whether it's lower or upper Water Street, and making sure that there are no negative costs to the residents of this city by building on a site that is possibly contaminated. Let's follow the letter of deep and make sure that we do our due diligence.
Well, my sentiments echo my colleagues, Ms. Byron and Ms. Landalis. I think I believe climate change to be a very real threat, and we have to take as much time as we possibly can when it comes to making a decision on these things. I certainly do support more residential development. But I still believe that we should pace ourselves as it pertains to this section of Norwalk and Sono.
Well, I think I don't disagree with what either of you are saying. But I think that by leaving out the zoning and just making the amendment to the POCD gives the city however much time it needs to address what are very serious issues.
But could it theoretically make it easier for, let's say, a developer who wants to propose a residential property along Water Street, the portion that's in question? How could it go in terms of litigation? Or would that?
I think that right now, Darius, any developer that wants to do development on that side of Water Street is limited to what the current zoning permits.
Yeah.
Right, so, yeah, so they couldn't try, even if the plan talks about allowing increased development there, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. They could propose it, they could come in with a text amendment, and then hopefully you guys would be consistent with your decision.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Them saying, no, we decided we're not going to do this. You're under zero obligation to do that, and from a litigation standpoint, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on.
All right.
Steve, why don't you put up the language and let's start talking about that.
Sure, Amelia, can you bring that up, please? These are quite small. Can you make it a little larger?
Yep, no problem.
Thank you, Amelia.
Yeah, you can maybe just scroll down to the yellow highlighted paragraph, because I think that's probably going to be the one that they want to focus on to start with. And this is the one that the other resolution text is the same as what was sent before, and this one is
Is that in the email that you sent on Friday, Steve? Is that the email where that is?
No, it was probably sent 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
What about strengthening the language just a little bit, just changing one word on that third line? Instead of just reconsidered after, reconsidered only after.
We could scroll up to the top too, if you wanted to see any of that. There are other just clauses that.
Let's give us an opportunity. I haven't seen this since this morning. I'd like to have a chance to read through it one last time. Can we keep moving, Amelia?
Oh, she was going at a good pace for me.
I'm sorry.
I've seen 3 here. It goes a little bit to your point about climate change. I think there's a lot of elements in the study that actually is going to enable the city to actually deal with the realities better, because this is what we're dealing with. There's no real, once the water comes in, there's nothing in all of the area that's catching it other than impervious surfaces and parking lots. Versus like the plan is aiming to help to promote people to build smarter, redevelop in ways that are going to actually reduce flooding.
Well,
as
yes,
a risk.
I'm not saying throw the entire baby out. with the
Yeah, no,
bathwater,
no.
But I do have concerns.
Totally.
But can't the city, to JG's point, those are infrastructure things that the city could address now. They could put the, whatever they're called, Caltech, the floodgates, to stop the water
Right.
from coming up the storm sewers. Those are kind of easy fixes without any redevelopment.
I'm not sure they're so easy.
Well, they're probably not easy,
Yeah.
true. I mean,
And I don't think it's either or though. That's not what I'm saying. Let's
No.
only rely on the whole resiliency thing that you saw last week. Yesterday was a bunch of plans that are going to come out.
Right.
There. Those storm gates are, I think, part of the equation to that.
Exactly.
And I think we have to hit it from, well, we can argue, debate or not. You have to hit it from multiple angles.
And hopefully as part of their report, they'll come up with some very preliminary cost estimates.
I mean, one of the things that I think about when I'm listening to all of this tonight is that, this document change that we're talking about doing is, kind of a roadmap as to where the city needs to go. So these resiliency studies and infrastructure studies have a direction. If we don't do anything,
Right.
then, what's the DPW and the rest of them aiming at? That's how I see this, especially with the nothing happening with the zoning until those plans are in place. It seems to me this is the logical first step.
Okay, Amelia, can we keep moving?
I believe this is it.
Thank you. All right,
Can I ask a question? Is there anything that we can do to incentivize the current businesses that are supportive of the boating community to maintain their specific water dependent uses? Is there anything, I don't know, similar to historic preservation that the city could do to incentivize that rather than something turning over into a water dependent use that's different and loses what so many people feel is special about Norwalk?
For a specific business, I think that's really tough to, it's something that they could probably commit to in the short term. I don't think that's a promise they could keep in the long term.
yeah,
I think it was the same thing we talked about the height allowances at your last meeting when we talked about the zoning regs and where hotels are allowed to be a certain height, but
right.
you're approving a hotel, but who knows if it's going to be a hotel in 10 years and then you've got a building that's taller. So I would advise you not to do that just because you can't control down the road that far.
Thank you.
But I support in spirit, though, what Anna just said. You know, Norwalk is well positioned to be the marina center of Fairfield County, because the Stamford pretty much, you know, got rid of most of their, they have maybe one small boatyard left. And we have, you know, Cove Marina, and we have Rex and all the others contributing a huge amount of money to Norwalk's economy in terms of employees and you know, people that drive down from Ridgefield to get on their boat. They go have dinner on Washington Street, probably. You know, whatever. There's just lots of spin-off economically from those water dependent uses. And I want to make clear that there is nothing in this plan that suggests replacing those with residential uses. Is that correct, Steve? Is that an accurate statement?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, again, going from north to south, the northern parcels are more than likely not going to have a large footprint water dependent use just because it probably won't work.
But they'd have the public access, which you said is classified as a water dependent use.
Right. And then they could also have a small, you know, they could have boat docks, small boat launch. So they'd still have some flavor of it, but it just wouldn't be like a shipbuilding yard or maybe not a big fishing operation, something like that.
Once we've acted on this, we can draw up some language that we can pass on to the redevelopment agency, asking them to do what they can to encourage those water dependent uses. I mean, basically, they have the staff that brings in businesses and works with existing businesses. It would seem to me that would be an appropriate place to pass on our concern to maintain and perhaps expand water dependent businesses.
I think Mike's example, I should have mentioned it myself, what happened in the south end of Stamford. I think, it brought a lot of residents to Stamford, but it completely eliminated an industry. And I think Norwalk ought to be careful because that could happen to us. What if?
Absolutely. These are economic,
Yeah.
decisions are made on the basis of economics.
I'm all
Yeah.
for economics, but I think we have something valuable that we should preserve.
Can I have a motion to approve this amendment? Richard has moved. Is there?
I'll second.
Okay, and we have a second. I think, is there any further discussion? All right, if not, Steve, I think we ought to do a roll call.
Sure. I'm going to do the three folks virtual first. So we're
Okay.
at them. Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Tabachnik,
I am gonna abstain for a
Ms.
couple reasons.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Abstain.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
Miss Jordan Byron.
So, this is with the new language, correct?
Correct. Just the, and it's not anything to do with the zoning, just the
Yes.
Miss Langallis
No,
and Mr. Schulman.
Yes,
Is that
I believe that's 6.
6, 1, 2?
6-1, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so the motion passes. You needed a 2/3 vote.
Right. It wasn't appropriate, I think, to say that right before the vote.
what was it? What I said?
No, that we needed a 2/3 vote.
Oh.
Didn't want to put additional people should vote their conscience. Okay, we have 4 other pieces of business. I want to apologize to the people who have been waiting. But this was important business that we had to do. And I have a further apology, and that is we almost always take a 10-minute break during our meetings. And I have a request from one of the commission members that we do that at this point. So it's now 8:24. We will reconvene at 8:34. Okay,
8:30 or 8:34?
8:34, Mike.
Thank
10
you.
minutes.
Yeah, and just
Don't be late.
be careful. The microphones may be on, so just.
Okay. JJ, I know you're getting something to eat. I have an extra Coke if you want.
No, I'm gonna actually go home and log on at home,
Oh, okay, okay,
and I could eat my soup offline.
good. Then we'll see you online.
All right.
No.
Yeah, that's what I always do when I black the screen on a meeting.
That's what I'm gonna be doing.
I saw myself on YouTube one time eating, I realized that. So it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. All right.
Solutions are so important.
Right.
No, when I first started.
Okay. The next item is 2023-57 SPR. Bill and Andrea Pecorello, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. 430 Main Avenue, District 5, Block 22B, Lot 11. Proposed boutique manufacturing use within existing building for Sweet Pea Bakery. Report and recommend action. Steve, what is this? Is this site plan review?
Technically, yes, because we tried our hardest to not have to make them come in front of the commission just because
Okay.
of the scope and scale, but boutique manufacturing does require the site.
Okay. Mr. Pecorello, I see you, and is that your wife behind you?
That is correct.
Hi.
Okay. Please tell us what it is you're doing and what you want to do.
We have, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So we have a nonprofit bakery, Sweet Pea Bakery. We are currently in a location in Norwalk right now, and we just need a little bit more space. Our landlord needs the space back for her own use. So we took this space. We are a nonprofit. We train and employ adults with disabilities. We are mostly a training program that we have adults come to us. We have 2 15-week training programs, and we are currently in our second round of 2 15-week training programs. Everybody that we've trained has been hired by us. We also own a restaurant, Bill and myself, with the same mission of training and employment for adults with disabilities. Right now, Sweet Pea Bakery supplies the baked goods for our restaurant in Westport. So we are just looking, we have classes during the day. The manufacturing part of it is that our Colossal Cookies, some other nonprofits carry them, like the Westport Library, the Westport Country Playhouse, the Prospector Theater in Ridgefield. So because of that, I guess we needed this special permit.
The space is less than 1,000 square feet. There's no large equipment. There are no 18-wheelers pulling up to the back of the building. Everything is delivered in my Subaru. So any other questions we would love to answer. We started in 2019, and this is just a new space for us.
Why didn't you send us cookies?
You know, I asked if I could. I didn't want it to look like bribery. So once we get all this done, you would never want for a colossal cookie again.
I'm just joking.
I hope that you'll read about us. You know, we gave our website and so forth, but the state knows about us, and actually Mayor Willing knows about us even before Sweet Pea, because we helped start a small baking program, which was the idea behind Sweet Pea, for another organization in Norwalk. So he's known us for years as well.
And we work
We're
with,
really good tenants.
and we work with the local schools. One of our students and our employees came from Norwalk High School Transition Program. So we work with the local high schools transition program and the training and employment.
Are there any questions? No?
What is it that we're actually reviewing? Is there something on the screen share?
Not at present. We can pull up
Okay.
anything. It basically, it's a.
I mean, what's the question where?
It's the same location that
Yeah,
the cannabis is going into.
So it's,
Right.
it's not, there's no exterior changes. It's all interior to the existing plaza.
New Hampshire.
It's really the only, and just not to confuse it, but it's just a use question, which is use complies. I mean, they comply with parking, they comply with all of the criteria, but this is, just does require a commission, yes vote. So-
Okay.
Okay.
So Nick has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Tammy, I'm sorry, Mike, Tammy got her hand up first.
Okay.
We have in front of us the draft resolution to approve. Okay, is that the end of the resolution? Yes, it is. Okay, I think, Steve, unless there are other questions, we're ready to take a vote on this?
I just want to say thank you. This is a great organization from what I just heard. I didn't know about it previously, and just thank you for everything you do.
Thank you so much.
Obviously, I'm going to be voting for it.
Steve, it's just too difficult for me to try and do this with a hand raise since I don't show everybody here. So let's do a roll call.
Certainly, Ms. Tabachnik,
Yes.
Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
Ms. Lingalis.
Yes.
Mr. Cantor.
Yes.
I'm assuming I don't see Darius or JJ back yet, so I will exclude them from this one. And then Mr. Schulman.
Yes,
That is unanimous.
so it's unanimous. Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Please
you.
come visit us there. And before we open there, you could get all of our baked goods at the Porch at Christie's on Cross Highway in Westport. Just come ask for me. Thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
really
Thank you.
have-
Okay,
If you go like this with your screen, you can see everybody.
I think I'm seeing everybody. No?
Lou Darius isn't going to be able to call back in, he said.
Oh, okay. So it's just JJ.
Whoops, sorry, I'm gonna crash.
I tried that too.
Mr. Tech Guy? Could you come help Lou see everybody? It's not functioning quite accurately. Thank you.
I think I'm missing Anna.
We tried squeezing the screen. but
Oh,
that's-
here's Anna.
So this is everyone that's present right now.
Yeah, he can't see it the way, he can't get as many faces on his screen as I'm getting on mine.
She has 9. I now have 9.
JJ is on.
JJ is on.
Yep.
Okay. I don't see JJ.
Well, on my screen, she's right next to Anne.
Put more boxes on.
Anne is in the dark. Like a horror movie.
She had a flashlight.
I know, it looks like
Yes, that's so funny.
Blair Witch scene.
Yep.
Let's not take any more time.
All right, it just doesn't want to like blue.
Exactly. Next item, Steve, I presume this is a site plan review as well.
I believe it's a CAM application.
Oh, I apologize. You're right. It is CAM. This is 2023-52 CAM, Mark and Pamela Hollis, 10 Harborview Avenue, District 5, Block 85C, Lot 29, demolition of existing and construction of new single-family residence. Report and recommended action. Okay, turn it over to, is it John Conti?
Yes.
Okay,
Can you all hear me okay?
yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much in advance for your consideration of this application. As Mr. Chair said, it's a CAM application. I'm here tonight. I don't know if I said my name. I'm John Conti from Conti and Conti LLC, the civil engineer for the project. Also with us is Bill Earls, the architect, John Conti Sr., the landscape architect, and Mark and Pamela Hollis are also on the call, I believe, as well. Is it all right if I share my screen?
You're away.
Okay.
Yes.
Can everybody see this?
Yes, we can see the
Aerial.
screen.
Okay, great. So just a quick overview of where the site is. This is Harborview Avenue here. This is Neptune Avenue up here. The site is where this red icon is, the existing house. And this is the Norwalk Harbor over here on this side of the screen. So under existing conditions, now this is oriented perpendicular to what you just saw, Norwalk Harbor on the top of the page, Harborview Ave on the bottom. This is the existing site. There's a single family 2-story residence on the site hatched here in the V zone. This west side of the site is in the A zone. The whole site is in a flood hazard area. There's an existing concrete walk in the back here with a seawall, staircase, and dock. There's no changes proposed to this portion of the site. And there's an existing asphalt driveway that serves the site. The existing house is at elevation 12 roughly. And the current elevation for the V zone here is elevation 15. So this house is definitely woefully out of compliance with current FEMA standards. It even has a garage down at elevation 4.5. The proposal is to demolish that existing building and construct a new residence shown here in this sort of beige color with a new porous pavement driveway serving the house. And again, here you can see that all this infrastructure is to remain. The new house, first floor will be at elevation 18. And the lowest horizontal structural member will be 1 foot above the base flood elevation in the V zone, as well as all the mechanicals serving this building will also be above that elevation in compliance with that zone. Additionally, the building will be on concrete piers with a concrete grade beam. And the only thing on the lower level that's proposed, I can show a section here, is a garage and storage area. So you can see down at this level, it's just a concrete slab, no mechanicals, just a storage area. And the finished portion of the home is, like I said, at elevation 18 above that.
And am I looking at 2.5 stories?
Yes, I believe it's 2.5 stories. Mr. Earls could probably comment better. I believe this application has a variance for height.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. In order to mitigate any impacts of stormwater. As I said before, this piece of pavement here is proposed to be porous, meaning that rainwater will infiltrate into the ground here. And it will serve to increase water quality, decrease the volume of stormwater leaving the site, and improve the quality of water leaving the site. We also have S&E control plan to mitigate any impacts from stormwater runoff during construction. There's silt fence, double row of silt fence along the harbor side, and silt fence really wrapping the entire property, as long as as well as a tracking pad to try and keep the neighborhood street clean during construction. Additionally, we have, based on staff comments, a planting plan with some, well, actually, John Senior, do you want to just give a brief overview of this plan?
Sure. So based on the staff report that came out, we looked at this, and we also looked at the site and the neighboring properties. And we did provide 2 pockets of planting on each side of the property, the north and south side, to catch water that would be coming down the sides of the house towards the water. Again, keep in mind there's a very robust seawall and concrete walkway there that really does protect the shoreline. But as a biofilter to catch rainwater, we are proposing a mostly native planting plan. We used a couple of plants that are very, very good performers, the grasses and the Russian sage, but we're also using juniper and native rose, redwood dogwood, and summer sweet. So the idea here is to buffer a little bit. Staff had commented about bringing the plantings all the way out to the property, which the applicant is happy to do. We didn't do that only because he's trying to sort of walk the line to being a good neighbor. None of the other properties have any plantings separating them, and you get this sort of nice open lawn area between all the shared properties. So it seemed like it might be actually inappropriate to just put 2 barriers running down the property line. So we stopped it short. We think that they'll do the job of catching rainwater and doing some water cleansing and filtration. We'll set them a little bit low so they sort of catch water as they come through. We also put some plantings around the driveway, that little pull-off area we planted again for neighbors. And other than that, it's a fairly simple planting plan. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you've had a long night, so I'll stop there.
I just want to briefly add that staff has commented that they don't view this as a significant increase in the, I suppose, intensity of the use of the property, as well as the existing house is not compliant. The driveway layout is not compliant with zoning regulations, as well as the side yard setback and existing utilities, whereas the proposed house, driveway, and utilities will all be fully in conformance with Norwalk zoning regulations. So we think that this is a good candidate to improve a lot of out of conformance elements on this lot. And happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Amelia, any comments from the staff?
No, nothing besides what was mentioned in my memo. They were very responsive to the staff memo, making some improvements that I had suggested. Deep did send their letter out this week, so I don't know if everyone had a chance to review it. Basically echoed the same sentiments. Deep does not encourage building in the VE flood zone by any means. I think they had suggested moving the house out of the VE zone entirely, which I don't know would be possible, and I don't know that it would be more beneficial as there's already an existing foundation to relocate the entire house. But still, the sentiment is there that we do want to be cautious when improving new structures in the flood zones, especially in the VE flood zone. But the house is being raised to be flood compliant, and while they are increasing the living area and expanding towards the harbor a little bit, I don't think it would significantly increase threats to life or property, just because it is in a completely developed area. They're not impacting any natural resources directly. They're not proposing to remove anything. It's a developed site that's neighbored by a bunch of other developed sites.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I was curious, with the driveway you proposed, is there maintenance required to make sure it maintains its porosity?
Yeah, that's a good question. And but like any piece of infrastructure, maintenance is recommended. However, the University of New Hampshire has done a lot of studies on porous pavement, and actually they maintain their functionality even if you don't maintain them for many years. I think it's actually a really cool product that is a little bit foolproof. You lay it down and the water just goes in the ground. They do recommend vacuuming it on certain occasions, but that's really only if you're like putting sand down on it in the winter, which usually is not necessary at all because it doesn't really accumulate ice. So to answer your question, yes, it requires maintenance like anything, but it will still function very well, even if it's sort of not maintained.
Thanks.
Questions from commission members? Go ahead.
I have a question. Mike here?
I'm sorry, Mike, Tammy had her hand up first.
Oh, sure, sorry, go ahead.
You're next.
That's okay, thank you. Are the power lines buried over there?
Currently, they are aerial.
Aerial, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, I see there's a dock on this property, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Was there any, well, this is a question for staff then. It looks like there's a boat there. Is that sitting on the ground at low tide, or is that on a lift?
I do not know the answer to that question. I do know that I believe, and Mr. Conti can correct me if I'm wrong, the dock is being replaced. They actually just went to the Harbor Commission for both the camera referral for the house, and they went after being referred by the state who regulates tidal wetlands and docks. So I think that dock is being replaced. I can look into it if you'd like, Mr. Mushak, to see the exact details.
Now, well, I'm okay with knowing that the Harbor Commission is reviewing it, because what's shown there is actually really bad. I mean, that's something that the Harbor Commission doesn't like, because the boat sits down at low tide and crushes oyster shells and clam shells, and there could be fuel leaks from a outboard motor, for instance, it gets jammed. Anyway, there's lots of issues with a boat sitting on the dry ground at low tide.
I think
Go ahead.
I think Mr. Hollis I wasn't the consultant involved in that, but I think Mr. Hollis might be able to shed some light on what's happening with the dock.
Sure, and I'm only bringing it up because the Harbor Commission came up earlier on an earlier discussion, and I didn't see comments from the Harbor Commission on the project, but they did review it. Correct?
They reviewed and approved it. Yeah, we were up before them.
Last Wednesday, they found the proposal consistent with the harbor management plan.
Okay, but I guess if it was apartments, they wouldn't have approved it. But anyway, that's a snide comment. I apologize. That's in relation to an earlier application or a discussion. Yeah, let's find if there's somebody that could shed more light on the dock, that would be helpful.
Mark, are you able to?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I raised my hand. I was waiting to be sort of called there. Yeah, Mike, it's we recently received the final approval on that, and we contracted with Gary Wetmore to do the job to reconstruct it. Originally, we were going to extend it far out into the water, but we decided to forego that and just rebuild the current construction. And so there's a pad where the float will rest on, as opposed to just resting right on the ground when the tide goes out. Which is in currently what they suggest. So that keeps from it resting on shellfish and grasses and things like that when it comes down, when the tide goes up. So we've been working on that for the last year or so, and we probably will construct it in sometime in early spring.
So just to be clear, the boat sits on a platform as well at low tide?
No. The boat does not sit on a platform, but my boat wouldn't sit on the ground there. I do have a mooring, which the boat will stay on when it's not high tide.
Does the Harbor Commission require the boat not to be there at low tide?
They did not say anything about that.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions from commissioner members? All right, if not, can we see the resolution? Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion. Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
Tammy has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and Richard has seconded. Any further comments? All right, again, if not, Steve, let's do a roll call.
Sure. Michelle, why don't you handle that?
All right. Is Miss Jordan Byron here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Were you present for, are you voting on this application? I'm sorry, were you here for
I'm
the?
going to abstain because I missed like the first 10 minutes.
Okay. one
Thank
abstention.
you.
Right, Miss Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Tabashnik,
Abstain.
Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Ms. Langalis,
Yes.
Mr. Schulman,
Yes,
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
and Mr. Rowena.
Yes.
okay. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time and attention.
Next item, also CAM 2023-56. CAM, Stephen Silvestri, 2 Channel Avenue, District 5, Block 85C, Lot 53. Raise an existing single-family residence on piers and add second-story addition. Mr. Silvestri,
Yes, hello,
turn
good
it over to
evening.
you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm joined by my wife as well as Tim Peck, who will be representing us as our architect tonight. We're actually just moving right down the street from the previous application. Other side in the marsh. Yeah, we are raising over, we're raising our house on the same footprint. Making some meaningful changes as it relates to what we want to do with the house, but we're very limited in the sense of any significant changes like rebuilding or anything like that. It's just pretty simple, raise over the existing footprint to be FEMA compliant. And as you stated, some additions as well as new side porch, rear deck.
Amelia, any comments?
No, not too many on this application. They did submit a revised planting plan with some plants or yes, a revised planting plan with some plants along the seawall, which were similar comments to what I had for the other CAM. I've not had a chance to look at it, so there's the same condition where it be approved by staff. So unless anyone has any comments, I can take a look at that and give feedback. I think it's a nice proposal. They're not increasing living area by too much. They're doing a small addition over existing footprint. They're actually raising the house to VE standards when the house is not in the VE flood zone, which is great, so that when flood zones move, the house should remain compliant for longer. But yeah, not too many comments on this one.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from members of the commission? Go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, are you changing anything about the land, the trees, the seawall, anything like that?
No, the seawall is staying intact. We do, as Amelia said, we do have a landscaping plan. We are removing a diseased pear tree in front of the house, which we were told to remove about 2 years ago, but we kept it around. But this is a good time to remove it, and we're just pruning back one of the marsh oak trees that's noted on the environmental report as part of the application so that we can raise. But we love our oak trees, so we're going to keep them.
Great, thank you.
And there's no letter from Deep on this one, right? I don't see it on the website.
No, Deep declined to comment on this application. I got an informal email back saying that they wouldn't be providing comments, but they think it's a strong application. Again, echoing my statements about the increased flood compliance being built to VE standards.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one comment, Mike here.
Go ahead, Mike.
I do have a former business relationship with this applicant and no current relationship. I don't think I have to recuse myself, but I would be happy to if the chair thinks I should.
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
All right, if there are no other questions, let's take a look at the resolution. Okay. And I have a motion to approve. Richard has moved to approve. Can I have a second, please? And Tammy has seconded. Any further comments or questions?
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
What's the silt fence at the drip line of the oak tree mean?
Amelia?
So they're preserving two of their oak trees on the property. So basically it's silt or construction fence. It's just to protect the trees during the construction of the house as recommended by our senior environmental officer.
Okay.
And I'll add that those trees are really landmark trees and quite beautiful. So great that they're saving them.
All right, let's do a roll call.
All right, Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Schulman,
Yes.
Ms. Langalis,
Yes.
Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Tabashnik,
Yes.
and Ms. Jordan Byron.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, the last item, 2023-58 SPR, Greenwich Realty Development LLC, 6 Butler Street, District 1, Block 9, Lot 3. Construction of a new 5-story, 20-unit multifamily structure. This is a preliminary review and approval of architectural peer review. If I can ask before I turn it over to Mr. Flaherty, Steve, who are you recommending for the architectural review?
That's still being discussed internally. We've had conversations with the redevelopment agency.
Oh, okay.
They've expressed some concerns about the design from what they've seen so far. So I know Brian is working with Jonathan Hopkins from redevelopment on that.
Okay. Mr. Flaherty, turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. For the record, my name is Craig Flaherty. I'm a principal and senior engineer of Redness and Mead, land use consulting company with offices in Stamford and Wilton. I am here representing the applicant, Greenwich Realty Development. They are actually an intermediate developer between the property owner, which is Bell Point. Bell Point, of course, is the developer of the Waypoint District. This property is a property that they've owned the whole time, and are proposing to have Greenwich Realty Development develop a small apartment building for Pacific House. Pacific House is the end user. Pacific House provides deeply affordable and supportive housing. Their mission is to prevent and end homelessness. So all of the apartments in this particular building will be deeply affordable, well below the standards you set in your zoning regulations.
Craig, when you say deeply affordable, is there a range that they generally target?
Yeah, they have certain grant money that they apply for through the state of Connecticut Department of Housing. And usually it ends up being something like half affordable, half the units affordable to those making less than 25% of the state median income, and half of the units affordable to those making less than 50% of the state median income.
Oh, it's amazing.
It is amazing. And they also, in addition to just the significantly subsidized housing, they pair it with social services and human services, to help people that might otherwise be unhoused get on the path towards a more stable future. As the chairman mentioned, this is just your 5-minute preview. The full discussion and full presentation will be at a later date, largely driven by the need for the design review by the redevelopment agency, since this is in the central business district. But I'll share my screen and just walk through it quickly for you to give you an idea of what's coming down the pipe. So the site is indicated here in yellow. It's on the south side of Butler Street, the same side of the street as the Children's Museum and Matthews Park. Of note in the neighborhood, of course, is the Art House across the street, is the old YMCA site, which you just approved an application for the redevelopment of. A large site in the middle of the screen is currently under construction as the Pinnacle by Toll Brothers. So that is your general neighborhood. Zooming in a little bit on the south side of Butler Street, there's a gas station on the corner. A bit of Matthews Park comes into Butler Street here. This is associated with the old mansion and associated with the park. So this is really fitting in between that. The previous structure is no longer there. It was part shoe repair shop on the first floor, part dwelling on the upper floor, and has since been removed. This shows you the proposed footprint on the site, with a driveway which really is to be used mostly for service, trash and recycling, people servicing the building, pickups and drop-offs. But the zoning required parking is actually located in the Pinnacle Garage across the street, which was approved as a part of that past site plan approval. That said, given the deeply supportive nature of the proposed housing, very few, if any, of the residents have cars that they drive. So parking is not really a demand. In fact, we've asked for a waiver of the traffic report, given that it will generate very little traffic, and kind of was already covered in the Pinnacle approval, given the parking was proposed there. So a quick view of the architecture, and Paul Selnow of Shadler Selnow Associates is on the call too. But this is a view of the front of the building. Basically 5 floors of mostly apartments. They've tried to provide a mixture of both studios, 2 bedrooms, and even on the upper floors, larger 3-bedroom apartments, because there's that's probably a very significant need, is to have units that can actually house families. So that's incorporated into the project as well. There's area for solar PV system on the roof, as well as some mechanical and mechanical equipment. And then this is the current look at the elevations. So that's your brief overview of the project as we get started completing the referral process and the design review process.
Questions for Mr. Flaherty?
Yes, I do have a question.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your presentation. How many of these units will be, or if they will be designated for seniors who are on a fixed income?
I don't know the answer to that question. I can pose that to Pacific House and we'll get back to you in the next presentation.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned that there are social services attached to that. Are they on site or are they at a separate office area?
They will bring services on site, but the answer is probably both. They already have facilities in Stamford and in Norwalk. So kind of how they choose to offer their services may vary, but we'll have a more specific answer to that at our next presentation.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you. Is there any green space included in this building, lot, parcel?
Yes, so we have a recreation area requirement that we have to meet. And so the areas at grade are largely going to be maintained as lawn and open and available for the residents to use it. And I will point out we are immediately adjacent to a park, which is a benefit of this location. So de facto, there is a lot of green space for folks to enjoy here. I should also mention that we're doing kind of the full required stormwater retrofit that the engineering division requires. So there'll be a new infiltration system that doesn't exist today to help treat the stormwater coming off the site.
Do you anticipate using any solar voltaic units?
Yes, we've allocated space on the roof for those.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's creative. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Nick.
You go first.
I want to say at first view, regardless of the purpose of the building, which sounds noble, the building appears boxy and rather plain. And especially with the facade facing the park, there's very little detail, shadow, relief, let's say, are on the edges in the form of pilasters or cornices, and it just feels institutional. And I think people relate, as much as I appreciate modern architecture, as people on this commission know, and sometimes bizarre modern buildings like the drive-through cannabis, which is going to be pink and purple, which I love. That's up on Connecticut Avenue, soon to be built, I assume. But anyway, this building just lacks, it sort of lacks context with what surrounds it in terms of the Lockwood Matthews Mansion, stepping stones, which is kind of unique in its approach. And I think this building, without spending a lot of money, because obviously the need is for the, as you said, deep affordable housing. It wouldn't cost much to, I think, improve on the look of the building, because people who live in a building respond to how that building looks. And this is in HUD language. It's in affordable housing language across the country. You want to make affordable housing as attractive as possible so that people have pride of place and feel like they're not coming home to just a shoebox looking place, but a real home. And this came up on the recent application, which was formerly owned by Bell Point on, is it Maple and
I think it was Artist.
Thank you. Yes, on that corner. Remember that mansard roof, kind of Victorian looking building that was recently approved by us? And that building had gone pretty far in terms of creating a great street presence there. And I'm not saying you have to look historical, because I don't like to go down that path. That building did it very well, but you know, it can sometimes look Disney-ish to have a fake historical looking building. But this one looks like it could use more detail. I'll be curious what the redevelopment agency review says. So obviously my comment is not going to have much impact here, since this is just a preliminary review. But I'm
Mike,
saying that I'm
Mike-
disappointed in the look of the building.
Mike, it's going to be a joint review by a consultant that's jointly chosen by us and by the redevelopment agency.
So are we authorizing that tonight in a vote?
We're not apparently, we're not authorizing the reviewer. We're authorizing a review.
Yes.
Because Steve still, I guess, needs to speak to the folks at redevelopment.
Well, I'll put my trust in the reviewers. Again, it has nothing to do with the end use of the building. It's just the look is rather institutional in a setting that I think requires some more, I guess the more fancy word architecturally is fenestration, more shadow, more relief.
Mike, if you can find the time to put those comments into writing and provide them to our staff, they can pass those on to the reviewer who is ultimately hired.
Well, all right, I'll just leave my words stand on that. It's just one less thing I have to do.
Okay.
No, that's fine. This is Paul Sala. I'm the architect. I've been taking some notes, so I will look at that with you.
And with all due respect, I know it's hard to have your work critiqued by any panel, but
It's okay. It's not the first time.
yeah, I didn't think so. And but I think you understand the language I'm using. in
Yeah,
terms
no,
of-
I do. I understand. It is quite a contemporary structure, but I'll work with you and your reviewer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, no
Nick?
problem.
Nick, you had a question?
I was just gonna say, I really appreciate the creativity with getting rid of the parking requirement here, putting it across the street where it's overparked and being able to do this project. I'm sure that created great relief to be able to do that, not having to worry about figuring out parking on this site. So I appreciate the thought there.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, one more question.
Sure.
Okay, so we had a similar applicant who is doing a similar project that you were proposing. And I'm just wondering, the question I asked them is, from which population are you targeting your tenant pool from? Their answer was from the general public. And so I know that was the open door in your Pacific House. And so I'm just asking you the same question.
Yeah, we'll get you that a very specific answer, but my guess is very simple. Since the money that they get to build these things comes from the state, they have certain obligations to follow, Fair Housing Act requirements and really the filter is need. That's the only filter. But I'll have them give you a full explanation at the final meeting if you want. In the meantime, they actually have a very good website and you can learn a bit about the work that they do.
Thank you. I'm somewhat familiar with the work that you do, but I will study up more. Thank you.
Okay. We have anything else before we let them go? Yeah.
I'd just like to echo Commissioner Mushak's response to the building, and not that you should do the same as a previous applicant, but just to give you an idea of what the commission thought was attractive. I think the address was Arch Street, but it was Arch in Berkeley. Maybe somebody on the staff could tell them exactly what address.
It's, I think Maple and Berkeley.
Maple and Berkeley?
I think that's
Maple and
correct.
Berkeley, yeah,
Right-
sorry, okay. Right in the city
Craig
of
should
Berkeley.
know. It's right across from
Practically
West.
across the street. Maybe you could look that up and just see what they were doing, and it was a affordable or type situation as well.
Yep, understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
Okay.
Oh, I'll add one more thing quickly.
Go ahead.
The views over the park are gonna be tremendous, from that spot, because you're gonna be just slightly, well, in the trees, above the trees, it's gonna feel like a tree house. And there's not a lot of windows on the back of the building, and I'm sure the layout it was sort of designed from the inside out, maybe in terms of windows, but it'd be great to see more windows facing the park, if only to benefit the light and views to the interior, if it's hallways and apartments, but also there is a benefit of having more windows on a park in terms of the it's like the eyes on the street kind of concept, where if there's anybody who's prone to criminal activity, if there's a bunch of windows looking at them, they don't know who's looking at them. And it's been proven in many studies that the number of windows facing as public space corresponds to the amount of crime in urban areas. And so more windows would actually make the park safer that building looked upon. It's just an idea because there's not that many windows on that facade that faces the park. I was surprised at that because the view is so nice. Anyway, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be glad to take a look at that. I was more, the concerned in looking at the ones on the side property lines because it's close to the property lines. But there's certainly an ability to add greater windows in the rear. I could definitely do that.
Thank you.
Well, on two sides, you do have fairly tall canopy trees.
That's correct.
So there, it would still be nice to look into the canopy trees, but I don't think there's going to be much of a view beyond. And then
Right.
On the other two sides, you are on the other, really the Children's Museum side is the side that you'd be able to view. And that's restricted a little bit by the 5-foot
Okay.
setback.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the preview. Look forward to the final application.
Yep. And I guess you'll authorize Steve to hire a reviewer.
Steve, we
Yeah, I should
need,
probably take a,
we should take a vote on authorizing the hiring, excuse me, of an architectural review, to be the reviewer to be selected jointly by the planning and zoning staff and the staff of the redevelopment agency. Can I get someone to move that?
So moved.
Richard moves, Tammy seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Okay, it's approved
Aye.
unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item of business, the approval of the minutes of the September 20th meeting. Those went out a little bit late, but you did receive them. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Richard moves. Galen, can I take those motions as a second? All right, Galen seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I haven't read them yet, but I'm going to read them right now.
I abstain. I didn't have a chance to read them.
Okay, so JJ and Tammy are going to abstain. I think we have enough to yeses to approve.
Well, should we just wait to see? I mean, if they want to make any changes, there's no need to rush that approval, is there? Or what do you, I mean, what if they want to make a change? Do we just revisit it?
We certainly can. We can
Yeah, all right.
visit it retroactively.
All right.
Comments of the director?
no, just very, well, yeah, I guess, yes. Very quickly, we have another meeting next Wednesday. We have several memos we're going to get out to you this week. Big crux of the conversation will be about adding that new single family zone back in because of the removal of the upzoning. Ryan's got that taken care of and a couple other things. I think we're actually pretty close to the end of, I have one memo that I'm very behind on that I need to get done. I'm shooting for Friday, but we'll see. Anyway, but yeah, I think I'm thinking forecasting out definitely 2 more meetings, maybe 3. The consultant indicated they'll have the edits to the plan to have the new zone back in before the end of the month. So we, and then Brian and I just have to import the other edits, so the public has, probably you want to give them at least 3-4 weeks to look at the changes that you guys have already talked about. So we'll add those back in and post like a red line version of the draft regulations up online.
So that's in November-ish, end of November-ish.
Yeah, so I think, you know, maybe you're talking public hearing beginning of December, mid-December.
Okay, comments of, go ahead.
I do have a question about the email that Brian sent out today. It went out kind of late, and this is in regards to an event that is hosted by the Fairfield County Community Foundation, PBS and NPR. It says it's on Thursday, October the 12th, but it doesn't say what time. I tried to click on the link, but it didn't open up.
Oh, I will, yeah, we got that forwarded to us, so we'll have to forward it, reply back, because I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm anticipating
Link
that our meeting on Wednesday will be remote. I think frankly, in terms of dealing with the map and the zoning regulations themselves, it goes a little more smoothly, especially since there's no comments from the public at those meetings. So that at least is the plan, 6 o'clock Wednesday, October 11th. Any other comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I had a question.
Just before you do, Richard, you're going to be more careful walking your dog?
Yes.
Wait, can you hear me?
No, go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't tell. Steve, are there any updates on the residential parking permits for East Norwalk discussion?
No, there are, I know there's internal conversations going on administration level, but I don't think there's been any decision one way or the other yet.
Okay. Do you know like what needs to happen to get there, or what the sticking points are, or decision makers, like where this is at?
I'll circle back with Jessica Bonashek about that, and she'll probably have to talk to the mayor about it to see, you know, if that is advanced any further on that level. So it's just higher up the food chain than I can give you an answer.
Okay. And I'm glad to hear that there's a plan to get the changes to the consultant and an updated version with a red line for the public to review. Are we still gonna have time to look at changes to the EVTC amenity bonus structure in the next couple of weeks before those changes have to go out?
Yes, that is on, so the 11th is next Wednesday. It'll be 2 weeks from that. So what is that? Maybe the
Okay.
25th. Yeah, that's my plan, is to have you a memo about that. And I think that at that same night, we'll talk about the flood zone reg changes too. So I think that those two pair work pretty well together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have a question, Mike here.
Yeah.
For Steve. That view shed discussion, because you sent me some information on Rowayton, but for the Mill Hill view shed, when would that happen? Is that something that we can discuss at some point? Or is that going to come up when an application comes in terms of the need to maintain that historical view from Mill Hill down across the O&G property?
Yeah, Brian put language together. I don't know if he's put it into a memo yet, so I'm not sure if you'll have a chance to get that out to you. He's not in the office tomorrow, Friday. We're at a conference, so.
Well, there's no rush. There's no rush. I just realized we didn't have that discussion earlier. And, you know, that area is included in the marine, isn't it? That area of the upper river on that side, isn't that included in what we just passed in terms of the zone?
It's in the plan amendment. yeah, Brian has some pretty specific language. I just had a couple questions on actually like how it gets quantified, if it makes sense, like like if somebody builds something, is it a 50-foot wide opening? That makes sense. I asked him just to go back and like sharpen his pencil a little bit. So as soon as he does that, we'll get you a memo and we'll put it on one of the agendas to talk about.
Sure, and I think the historical commission would be most interested in reviewing that, so. I just didn't want it to get too lost, too far away from when we brought it up. And because a lot of people are concerned about that in terms of any views blocked of the river. Since great effort over 20 years has been done to open up that view to the river, right? So that makes sense. All right, thanks. No rush, but I think at some point we can put language like that in to the zone change.
Hey, Tammy, you had a comment?
Yeah, just a request that when you send us our initial package of information, usually on a Friday, awesome, thanks for the fun weekend. But if you add documents and comments, can you go back and add it to the original email rather than all these different separate emails, if possible, please?
Agreed. Thank you.
Welcome.
What I was thinking I could do, it would probably make more sense, is send the new email, but if there's older documents that are relevant to that same application, send that. Reattach
Include
those.
them, yeah, especially if there's draft resolution document that goes along with that, because then we're looking back and trying to find it in the email. And Anna, Steve did tell me that if you go to this, the page on the city website, it does have it there, but it depends on how you open your documents and whether you find it easily. But like anything you can do to
Sure.
make it like.
Feel free to
kindergarten
scold us.
book.
whenever you should be.
Okay.
It's just helpful because we're looking at all these different emails and some come from Steve, some come from Brian. And, I missed something. I don't want to miss anything.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Richard has moved. Galen has seconded. All those in favor? Looks like it's unanimous.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.
Right.
Good night.
I will